Mom, I'm really sorry, but I've been thinking lately that I might have to drop out of college. I just can't afford it anymore. What do you mean? Shouldn't you be able to get by with $3,000 a month? Isn't what I send you enough? Wait, Mom, you've never sent me anything, have you? Her words hit me like a punch. I was sure I'd been receiving money from her every month. There's only one explanation for this. Anger started to boil up within me. The person I decided to confront was my own mother. My name is Beatrix. I lost my husband early, and I've been raising my daughter, Anita, all by myself. Our life together has always been a stretch. I never had the time or money to worry about my appearance. Did I look so miserable? Occasionally, my mother-in-law would look at me with disdain. Beatrix, can't you at least try to improve yourself a little? Your hair, your clothes, you look, well, a bit shabby. I'm sorry, I'll try to do better. It hurt to be criticized, but she was right. I had no choice but to accept her words. I've never let myself get angry or snap back at her. In the spring of a certain year, my daughter, Anita, was accepted to her dream college. It was a far commute from home, so she decided to live on her own. Anita, I'll do my best to send you money, so you have to do your best to study. Don't push yourself too hard. Remember, your health comes first. Mom, that's my line. I'll work part-time too. Don't worry about sending me money. Her thoughtful words filled my heart. Anita had grown up to be such a kind child. Even though our life had been tough compared to her friends and other families, I wanted to support Anita and make her college life as fulfilling as possible. I didn't want her to have to worry about money, so I worked harder than ever before. $3,000 a month, that was my goal. If I could send her that much, she wouldn't have to work a part-time job. My mother-in-law noticed my efforts and spoke to me. So, you're sending money to Anita. Can you really afford it? I hope that doesn't mean less for us. You know we rely on your support. I had always been grateful to my father-in-law when he was alive, and after his death, I continued to support my in-laws out of gratitude. Don't worry, I've taken on more jobs, so I'll still be able to give you your share. Oh, I see. That's fine then. After losing my husband, my income was unstable, and I guess my mother-in-law was worried. I understood her concern, so I never thought about reducing my contribution to my in-laws. Supporting my in-laws and sending money to Anita, it was more than $3,000 in total. Still, I managed to send it all, even if it meant cutting back on my own food and clothing expenses. Working all day and night was tough, but the messages from Anita always encouraged me. Mom, I've made friends. Mom, there's this weird professor, but the class is so interesting. Mom, I didn't do well in class today and got scolded, but I'll keep trying. Reading such innocent messages from Anita, I could sense she was enjoying her college life. Any exhaustion? I felt utterly blown away, a mix of pride and concern swirling within me. I had poured my heart and soul into working hard for Anita's happiness. But as time passed, her messages became sparse until they stopped altogether. A few months later, the cheerful updates ceased entirely. Whenever I reached out in worry, her responses were curt, "I'm okay." Could it be that college life had consumed her, causing her to forget about her mother? Or perhaps she had found a boyfriend and was solely focused on him. One day, lost in such thoughts, my phone rang suddenly. It was Anita. "Hello, Anita. What's up?" It was unusual for her to call. We typically converse face-to-face at home. Even after she moved to college, most of our communication was through text. "Yeah, I'm sorry, Mom. What happened?" Anita sounded down. I could sense something was amiss, so I concentrated on her voice through my smartphone. I ran out of money. I'm thinking maybe I should quit college." Anita's words hit me like a ton of bricks. "What do you mean you're out of money?" "I'm sorry, I tried my best," she said, her voice trembling on the verge of tears. I had faithfully sent her $3,000 every month without fail. It wasn't a lavish amount, but it should have been enough to prevent her from struggling to the point of contemplating dropping out. Besides, she was supposed to be working part-time as well. I couldn't fathom how she could be in such dire straits. Could she have fallen in with the wrong crowd, neglecting her studies to squander her money? I entertained the thought for a moment before shaking it off. No, that's not like Anita. "Anita, it's okay. Take a deep breath and tell me what happened." "Yeah. I was trying to make ends meet with rent, groceries, and my part-time job earnings. I had to dip into my savings, and now that's all gone too. I'm sorry, Mom. I'm really sorry." "Hold on a second. What about the money? I send you every month. That should cover your rent and living expenses, right? No. No matter how I calculated it, the numbers didn't add up. If Anita was spending her salary, my remittances, and even dipping into her savings, something was seriously wrong. But she didn't seem to be lying. Anita, you never sent me any money, did you? Her words hit me like a ton of bricks. That's impossible. I've been sending you $3,000 every month. Did you check properly? Are you sure there's no money in your account? There's nothing. I've been keeping a close eye on my banking. If you'd sent me that much money, I definitely would have noticed. The shock hit me like a punch to the head, leaving me feeling dizzy. It was clear Anita hadn't been receiving the money, and it was causing her a lot of trouble. You don't need to drop out of college. I'll send the money right away, so don't worry. Do you have something to eat today? Hey, you're not getting sick, are you? I'm fine. I switched to a job where I get meals, and my friends have been worried about me. They've been sharing some food with me. That's great. You have good friends. We need to thank them next time. But Anita, you're already having a hard time. I don't want you to struggle anymore because of me. So that's why you didn't tell me until the situation got this critical. Thank you. But listen, for me, seeing you in such a difficult situation is much worse. So please leave the rest to me. With that, Anita finally let out her emotions and started crying. I wondered when was the last time I heard her cry like this. After comforting Anita and hanging up the phone, I immediately took action, driven by a growing anger. I decided to confront my mother-in-law, who lived nearby. Oh my, what's the matter, Beatrix? Showing up without a call? How rude. Never mind that. What have you been doing with the money I've been giving you each month? What money? Of course, that money is for living expenses, she replied, her face momentarily twitching when I mentioned the money for Anita. I'm talking about the money for Anita. I was giving that to you too, right? The remittance to Anita was not directly transferred by me into her account. I've been handing it directly to my mother-in-law, who lives nearby, and she offered to make the transfer herself when she learned it was for Anita. So, I have been giving her an additional $3,000 for Anita's remittance. I would have declined if it was only about transferring the money, but there was a reason I didn't. That's because she said, I want to contribute to my granddaughter too. That's what you said, right? I trusted you and gave you the money. But what do you mean you didn't transfer it? My mother-in-law had convinced me with that, even though she was getting money from me. I thought it was her kindness toward Anita and trusted her. What are you talking about? I've been transferring money to Anita's account every month. Yes, I have. Please stop lying so blatantly. Anita has told me that she never received any transfers. Oh my, for her to lie like that. What kind of child is she, Beatrix? Maybe it's your parenting that's the problem. Excuse me? Hearing my own daughter being called a liar made me feel a rush of blood to my head. But if I lost my temper and forgot myself here, it would play right into her hands. I told myself to calm down, took a deep breath, and spoke again. Anita doesn't lie. If you insist on this, show me the bank statements where you made the transfers. I threw those away a long time ago. Listen, by checking Anita's account history, it's easy to see whether you really transferred the money or not. Even after knowing this, are you still going to call Anita a liar? Anyone could think of this, but when I said it, my mother-in-law seemed at a loss for words. She huffed again, muttering stubbornly under her breath. So persistent. I took a deep breath and continued, if you insist that you transferred the money, we should let the police investigate. The police? Isn't that a bit dramatic? It's not. This is about money. You said you transferred it, but it didn't show up. That sounds like a crime to me. We need to get it properly investigated. I don't think we need to go that far. Well, then I'll contact them now. No, stop. As I pretended to call the police, she lunged to snatch the phone from my hands. She missed and stumbled, then fell down and started crying. I never expected the mere mention of the police to have such an effect. In reality, I wasn't sure if the police would do anything in a situation like this where it was obvious that a family member was involved. But the word police itself seemed to weigh heavily on her. Despite her sobbing, I felt nothing. Anita, who had tried so hard not to cry, was the one who had suffered. According to her subsequent confession, she had always loved shopping. She probably had a shopping addiction, although she didn't seem to realize it. She tearfully told me about how her husband had once cut up her credit cards and how difficult it was for her. As far as I could tell, it was entirely her own doing, but she didn't seem to understand that. I suspected something was off. My mother-in-law kept getting the same amount of money even after he passed away, but I started getting requests for money earlier than expected. That never happened when he was around because he never gave me any money. When I went grocery shopping, he would check all the receipts, and I had to return every cent of the change. Can you believe that? It was awful. I felt so pitiful. I couldn't begin to understand what she thought was pitiful and didn't bother trying. In other words, when her husband was alive, he managed the household finances and kept her from having any extra money. When he was gone, I finally had some money. I started buying things I couldn't afford before, and, well, I fell a little short. Then you mentioned sending money to Anita, so you took Anita's money. Do you realize that's theft? Theft? That sounds so awful. I was just borrowing it with no intention of returning it. Anita suffered because of your selfishness. She's young, she can handle it. Caught off guard by her incomprehensible retort, I was at a loss for words. I've been deprived for so long. I couldn't buy anything I wanted, couldn't even go out to eat or travel. I had such a hard life. Young people can work and play as much as they want, so why shouldn't I take some money? I stood there speechless, staring at my mother-in-law as she cried and screamed, and all I could think was that I had trusted this person. My father-in-law had done me many favors, but now that I think about it, I can't recall my mother-in-law ever being kind to me. However, when Anita was still a little girl, my mother-in-law did buy her various things, so I thought she was expressing affection for Anita in her own way. And I was relieved. Looking back, I suspect all that shopping was just to satisfy her own desires. I failed to see that, and I caused Anita unnecessary suffering. Such a gentle child. I can never regret it enough. Mother-in-law, no, Evelyn. I intentionally called her by her first name. I don't want to think of her as my mother, even if it's just in-law. I cannot forgive you. After that, I sought free legal advice and did everything I could to recover the money, but you can't take from a person who has nothing. However, I had a trump card. Before my father-in-law passed away, he left me a will giving me the rights to his property. At that time, I wondered why he left it to me, but now I can guess that he might have been worried about his wife's reckless behavior. Naturally, my mother-in-law demanded that I renounce the inheritance, but I firmly refused. I want to praise my past self for staying firm despite being severely criticized as a greedy daughter-in-law. No matter what they say, I felt that I couldn't disregard my father-in-law's feelings. I didn't know the reason or the circumstances, but maybe I felt something. So technically, the house and the land are mine and my mother-in-law is just living there rent-free. I decided to sell the house. That meant the parasitic mother-in-law living there was in the way. So I contacted my mother-in-law's parents. This contact information was secretly given to me by my father-in-law, just in case. I really admire his foresight. That's why it's such a shame he didn't have a good eye for women. I knew that my mother-in-law had always hated her own family, but the reason became clear when I contacted them. They were a traditional farming family with strong tendencies toward male chauvinism. A stranger like me called, and they listened with a suspicious attitude, but they gladly agreed to take in my mother-in-law. It seemed like they wanted free labor. The conversation progressed quickly, and one day, out of the blue, her family came to pick her up, an event that my mother-in-law couldn't have predicted. I'll never forget the color draining from her face. When I took her brother, who came to pick her up, to her house, now my mother-in-law is doing tough farm work under strict supervision. She can't even go shopping at the supermarket, let alone squander money, and she seems to be living the life without touching money at all. Due to the stress, she seems to have aged quickly and is working every day as a wrinkled, frail, ghost-like figure with white hair. Looking at the recent bank statement of the money I just transferred to Anita, I smiled, thinking that if I saw her at night, I might scream. The house sold easily. It wasn't in a particularly good location, but once I decided I was okay with selling it for a low price, a buyer came forward immediately. The amount was enough to recoup the money wasted by my mother-in-law. I used that money without hesitation for my living expenses, and I sent Anita the money I earned from working. It's all money, but somehow the money I got from selling the house feels tainted, and I didn't like that. I've transferred this month's money just now. With that thought, I quickly texted Anita. Even if I hadn't transferred the money, as long as I had communicated that I had sent it to Anita, she wouldn't have discovered the mistake so late. I regret now for neglecting such simple communication due to my busy schedule. The reply came swiftly. Got it? The message full of Anita's usual energy, accompanied by a string of cute emojis. She checked so quickly, but these days it seems you can easily check your bank balance on your mobile phone. I don't understand it at all, so I can only admire the adaptability of the young. Since then, Anita started sending messages frequently again. With the money reliably reaching her, her life must have become stable. It's clear from her texts that she's energetically continuing college without quitting. While I was feeling pleased, another message arrived from Anita. Looking at it, my eyes widened, and I broke into a grin. Mom, there's someone I want you to meet. I didn't expect this day to come. It was all worth it. I can't sit around. I need to prepare something good. I changed my plan and headed to a high-end supermarket I don't usually go to. Since I no longer have to send money to my mother-in-law, there's a bit more wiggle room in my life. I've even been able to quit a few of the jobs I was juggling. I wondered what kind of food my daughter's partner likes. With a bit of premature speculation, I laughed. In the near future, I plan to invite the fresh-faced couple to our home and treat them with the best hospitality I can muster.
After the tragic accident, I was hospitalized in the ICU and fell into a coma. My greedy husband assumed I would never recover. He gained control of my savings accounts and assets, brought in a new mistress, and enjoyed a lavish vacation. But after recovering, I returned with a shocking revenge that forced him to live on the streets. I used to believe my life was perfect. Looking back now, I realize it was nothing more than an illusion, a carefully crafted lie that I had been living in for years. My name is Elena Carter, and I was once a respected corporate lawyer in Chicago. I had built my career from the ground up, working tirelessly to earn my place among the city's top legal minds. At 35, I had everything: a prestigious job, a beautiful home, financial stability, and, most importantly, a man I thought was my partner in life. Ryan Carter, my husband of 8 years, was a successful real estate developer. We were the power couple, admired by many, envied by others. Or so I thought. Ryan was charming, confident, and knew exactly how to make people believe in him, including me. I had no reason to suspect anything. I was too busy working on high-profile cases, too distracted by the never-ending demands of my career to notice the cracks forming in my marriage. Maybe that was my biggest mistake, trusting too much. Then, everything changed on one stormy night in October. I had spent the entire day at work, preparing for a major trial. It was late when I finally left the office, the rain pouring heavily as I drove home. I remember glancing at my phone, seeing Ryan's text, "Be home soon." Even in that moment, I felt comforted knowing he was waiting for me. But that feeling didn't last long. As I turned onto a dark, empty street just minutes from home, I noticed a pair of headlights in my rearview mirror. The car behind me was speeding, closing in fast. At first, I thought it was just another reckless driver, but then it happened. The car slammed into my back bumper. My hands clenched the wheel as I tried to steady myself, but before I could react, the car hit me again, harder this time, sending me spinning. My tires skidded against the wet pavement. My heart pounded. I tried to regain control, but then a final impact. Everything went black. When I woke up, I wasn't at home. I wasn't in my bed, wrapped in the warmth of my husband's arms. Instead, I was lying in a cold hospital bed, surrounded by the rhythmic beeping of machines and the sterile scent of antiseptics. My body ached, every muscle screaming in pain. I couldn't move. A nurse appeared, offering me a reassuring smile. "You're awake, Miss Carter. You've been unconscious for weeks." Weeks? My breath caught in my throat. I tried to piece together the last thing I remembered: the rain, the headlights, the impact. But the details were hazy. Then the doctor came in. Dr. Laura Bennett, a highly respected neurosurgeon, explained everything. The crash had left me with severe internal injuries, a fractured leg, and a head injury that put me in a coma for nearly a month. The fact that I survived it all was a miracle. I asked for Ryan. I expected him to burst into the room, relieved, his face filled with love and worry. But he didn't. He never came. Instead, the doctor's expression turned uneasy. "Your husband hasn't visited, Miss Carter." The words hit me harder than any crash ever could. I stared at her, waiting for her to say it was a mistake. But she didn't. In the following days, I learned the full extent of his betrayal. Ryan hadn't just ignored my accident, he had used it to his advantage. The moment he assumed I wouldn't survive, he took control of my finances. My assistant, who had visited me in the hospital, whispered the ugly truth. Ryan transferred all your funds. He said it was for your medical expenses, but he's been taking trips, Elena. He's not alone. Not alone. My blood ran cold. A name I had only heard in passing, a 28-year-old social media influencer, known for flaunting designer clothes and luxury vacations on Instagram. Ryan's mistress. It wasn't just the money. He had drained my savings, maxed out my accounts, and even sold some of my properties to fund his new lifestyle. He wasn't by my side because he was too busy spending my money on Vanessa, taking her on lavish vacations to Miami, Paris, and Dubai. I lay in that hospital bed, feeling my entire world crumble around me. The man I loved, the man I had trusted with my life, had discarded me the moment I was no longer useful to him. I clenched my fists, my nails digging into my palms. Pain. Betrayal. Rage. Ryan thought I was gone. He thought he could erase me, take my life, and move on as if I never existed. But I survived. And I wasn't just going to sit back and watch him get away with it. I was going to make him pay. I spent the next few weeks recovering, but my mind was no longer focused on healing. It was focused on retribution. My first call was to David Martinez, a private investigator and an old friend I had once helped with a legal case. David was sharp, resourceful, and had a talent for uncovering secrets. When I told him what had happened, he didn't hesitate. We'll bring him down, Elena. I promise you that. I needed proof, solid evidence that Ryan had committed fraud, that he had stolen from me, betrayed me, and left me for dead. David assured me that within a few weeks, he would gather everything I needed. Meanwhile, I focused on regaining my strength. I forced myself to walk, to move, to fight through the pain. Every step, every breath was fueled by one thought: revenge. Ryan thought I was out of the picture, but he had no idea what was coming for him. I wasn't just going to take back what was mine. I spent weeks in the hospital, not just recovering, but plotting. Every painful movement, every sleepless night fueled my determination. I wasn't just healing, I was preparing for war. David was already working in the background, digging up everything he could on Ryan. Every day, I waited for his calls, eager to hear what new piece of Ryan's treachery he had uncovered. I wanted proof. Undeniable, solid proof that would rip his life apart, just like he had tried to do to mine. Then one evening my phone rang. It was David. His voice was calm, but there was a sharpness in his tone that told me he had found something big. Elena, he said, you're not going to believe this. I held my breath as he continued. Ryan didn't just empty your accounts. He's been forging your signature on documents, selling your properties, and taking out loans under your name. I felt my fingers tighten around the phone. How much? Close to $2 million in total. And get this, he's already moving to sell your penthouse. The paperwork is almost finalized. I shook with rage. That penthouse was mine. I had bought it with my money, my hard work, and he was just selling it like it meant nothing? I exhaled slowly. We need to stop him. David chuckled. Oh, don't worry. We will. But first, we gather more. The bigger the case we build against him, the harder he falls. I knew he was right. I had to be patient. But patience was the last thing I wanted right now. Still, I played along. A few days later, David sent me photographs. Ryan and Vanessa in Miami, lounging at a beachside villa, funded with my money. The sight of Vanessa, draped in a designer dress and expensive jewelry, made my stomach turn. David dug deeper, pulling bank records, emails, and legal documents. I had always known Ryan was selfish, but what I saw now was beyond greed. He had made sure to erase me completely from his life, while using every single resource I had worked for to build a new one for himself. But what infuriated me most was how easy he thought this was. He hadn't just stolen my money, he had stolen my identity. He had forged documents, ensuring that everything was transferred into his name, thinking I would never return to claim what was mine. Well, he was wrong. I left the hospital sooner than expected. My doctor was hesitant, but I assured her I could manage. I had too much work to do. The first step? Regaining control of my finances. I met with my bank, bringing David's gathered evidence. The manager was stunned by what he saw: the forged signatures, the illegal transactions. I filed official fraud charges against Ryan, freezing all accounts linked to him. Within 2 days, his world began to crack. I imagined the moment he tried using my money and found everything blocked. The panic, the confusion, it was only the beginning. David had one more surprise for me. Ryan has been bragging about an investment deal with some very important people, he said one night. He's about to meet them in a few days. A real estate deal? That was perfect. I had spent years in corporate law, and I knew exactly how to ruin him. I called in a favor from an old friend in the legal world, someone Ryan wouldn't see coming. Together, we drafted an anonymous legal notice exposing Ryan's fraud and financial instability. It was sent directly to his investors the night before his big meeting. The next morning, Ryan arrived at the meeting, expecting to secure millions in funding. Instead, he was met with angry investors, slamming documents onto the table, demanding answers. David was there, watching from the corner of the room, discreetly recording as Ryan's perfect world started falling apart. I wasn't done yet. Next, I went after Vanessa. She thought she could steal my life and walk away untouched? Not a chance. I gathered proof of her involvement in Ryan's financial fraud: emails, messages, receipts. She wasn't just a clueless mistress. She was in on it, helping Ryan forge documents and make illegal transactions. David hand-delivered the evidence to the authorities. Within days, Vanessa's accounts were frozen, and she was under investigation for fraud and tax evasion. Her shrieking meltdown on social media was everything I had hoped for. "This is a mistake. I didn't do anything wrong," she wailed in a video, her perfectly curated influencer persona crumbling before thousands of followers. Ryan, now financially paralyzed, had no way to help her. The best part? My next move would leave them both with nothing. I filed an eviction order against Ryan, reclaiming my mansion. He had no idea it was coming until security arrived at his doorstep, giving him exactly 1 hour to vacate. When he called me, furious, demanding answers, I finally answered. "Elena, what the hell is going on? You can't do this." I laughed, a cold, sharp sound. "Oh, Ryan. I can, and I already did. This is my house," he yelled. I smiled.
"No, Ryan."
"It's mine. Always has been." Then I hung up, picturing him standing outside in the cold, watching security throw his expensive suits onto the pavement. He still didn't know the worst part. I had one final strike left to deliver. And this one, it would destroy him completely. The moment I hung up on Ryan, a strange kind of calm settled over me. But it wasn't peace. It was the silence before the final storm. He had tried to erase me. He had left me for dead, stolen everything I had worked for, and paraded around with his new mistress, thinking I'd never come back. But now, his perfect little world was collapsing, and I wasn't even done yet. I woke up the next morning with a sense of purpose. There was only one thing left to do: finish this once and for all. David had sent me a message before sunrise. Ryan's scandal had hit the media. The first article appeared before noon. Disgraced real estate developer accused of financial fraud. Ryan Carter's luxury life built on stolen money. Betrayed wife fights back. Exposes husband's crimes. The headlines were brutal. They painted him as a con artist, a fraud who had built his empire on stolen money and deception. By early afternoon, the calls started. David kept me updated. Ryan's investors were furious. They had trusted him with millions, and now they were pulling out one by one, cutting ties before his downfall could drag them down too. His former colleagues turned their backs on him. The same people who had once shaken his hand, smiled at his charm, and called him a genius were now distancing themselves as fast as they could. I imagined Ryan sitting in whatever expensive hotel he had left, scrolling through the news, his hands shaking, his mind racing. Everything he had spent years building was falling apart in a single day. But I wasn't done yet. That night, my phone rang. It was David, and this time, I heard satisfaction in his voice. "Elena," he said, "you're going to love this." I leaned back, gripping the phone. "Tell me." "Ryan's been arrested." I felt my heart stop for a second.
"What?"
David let out a dark chuckle. One of his investors filed fraud charges against him this morning. The police picked him up outside a cheap motel. I closed my eyes, letting the news sink in. So, this was how it ended for him. Not just broke, humiliated, abandoned, but now in a jail cell. The man who had once walked through the most prestigious offices in Chicago, who had once laughed at the idea of consequences, was now sitting behind bars. For a second, I thought about going to see him, standing on the other side of that glass, watching him beg for help. But no, that would be too easy for him. I wanted him to feel the weight of everything he had done, with no one there to save him. Ryan had spent years lying, stealing, and manipulating his way to the top. And now he had finally lost. Of course, Vanessa was nowhere to be found. The moment she realized Ryan was no longer useful, she vanished. She had built her entire life on other people's wealth, feeding off their success like a parasite. And now that Ryan had nothing, she had no reason to stay. She tried reaching out to me once. A long, pathetic email. "Elena, I had no idea what Ryan was doing. I was just caught up in everything. Please, you have to believe me. I had nothing to do with it. I'm just as much a victim as you are." I stared at the message for a long time. Then, without hesitation, I deleted it. She deserved everything coming her way. But I wasn't done yet. With Ryan gone, it was time to rebuild. The first thing I did was reclaim everything he had stolen. My bank accounts, my properties. I made sure his name was erased from every single thing he had once tried to take from me. I didn't just want my life back. I wanted to rebuild it into something even stronger. So, I made a decision. One that changed everything. I had spent my whole life working in corporate law, representing the wealthy, protecting the powerful. But after what I had been through, I realized something. I didn't want to fight for the rich anymore. I wanted to fight for women like me, women who had been cheated, manipulated, and left behind. So I quit my high-profile job, and I started something new. A law firm dedicated to helping women who had suffered betrayals, women who had lost everything to men like Ryan. And for the first time in my life, I felt powerful. Not because of what I had, but because of what I had survived. Then, a few weeks later, David sent me a picture. Ryan. He was sitting on a sidewalk. His once expensive suit was now wrinkled, stained, unrecognizable. His hair was unkempt, his face a shadow of the man he used to be. This was the man who had once mocked me, betrayed me, left me to die. And now he had nothing. I stared at the image for a long time. Then I slowly reached for my phone and pressed delete. Because Ryan Carter was no longer a part of my story. The days following Ryan's downfall felt surreal. For the first time in years, I woke up without a sense of dread, without the weight of his betrayal pressing against my chest. It was over. He was done. But despite everything, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was one final chapter left to be written. Ryan had fallen, but I needed to see it for myself. So one cold evening, I did something I never thought I would do. I went to find him. David had told me where he was, a rundown homeless shelter on the outskirts of Chicago. He had nothing left. No home, no money, no reputation. Everything he had stolen from me had been taken back, and his fraud case ensured that no one in the business world would ever trust him again. I stood outside the shelter for a long time, watching through the glass windows as people shuffled in and out. Then I saw him. At first, I wasn't even sure it was him. The man I had once known, the one who had spent years dressing in the finest suits, who had always carried himself with arrogance, was now unrecognizable. Ryan sat hunched over at a small table, staring at an untouched plate of food. His once perfectly groomed hair was now greasy and disheveled, his sharp suit replaced with a faded sweatshirt and worn-out jeans. For a long time, I just watched him. No pity, no regret. Just the quiet satisfaction of knowing he had finally lost. Then, as if sensing my presence, he lifted his head. His eyes met mine through the glass. For a brief moment, I saw something flicker in his expression, shock, disbelief, and something else, something like fear. I pushed open the door and stepped inside. The room smelled of cheap soup and damp clothes, a stark contrast to the lavish restaurants where Ryan had once dined. Every eye in the room turned toward me, but I ignored them. I walked straight to his table. Ryan looked like he had seen a ghost. "Elena," his voice was hoarse, weak. I pulled out the chair across from him and sat down. "You look terrible." He let out a dry, humorless laugh, running a shaky hand through his unwashed hair. I don't even know what to say." I leaned forward slightly. "You don't have to say anything. I just came to see it with my own eyes." He exhaled sharply, shaking his head. "You won. You destroyed me." I tilted my head, studying him. This was the same man who had left me for dead. The man who had stolen my money, my home, my identity. The man who had thought I would never fight back. "I didn't destroy you, Ryan," I said calmly. "You did that all on your own." He swallowed hard, his hands trembling as he rubbed them together for warmth. "I was stupid," he muttered. I thought I could get away with it. You thought I would stay weak," I interrupted. "You thought I would never come back."
He didn't respond. He didn't need to.
Ryan Carter, the man who had once believed himself untouchable, was now nothing more than a cautionary tale. He let out a deep breath, looking down at his hands. "I have nothing left." For the first time since I had walked in, I smiled. A slow, deliberate smile. "Good," I said softly. His eyes snapped up to mine, wide with desperation. "Elena, please. I made a mistake. I was selfish. I wasn't thinking. I lost everything. Maybe we can fix things." I let out a short laugh, shaking my head. "Fix things? I don't have anyone else," he whispered. "Vanessa's gone. My friends abandoned me. I have no job, no home. I don't even know where to go after this." I stared at him for a long time, then leaned in closer. "You want my forgiveness, Ryan?" He nodded quickly, his eyes pleading. "Yes, Elena. Please." I cut him off with a slow shake of my head. "No." His lips parted slightly, as if he hadn't fully processed what I had just said. I stood up, pulling my coat tighter around me. "You don't deserve forgiveness. You deserve every single thing that's happened to you." "Elena, please," he rasped, his voice barely above a whisper. "I'll do anything." I met his eyes one last time, completely unaffected by his desperation. "You once told me I was too serious," I murmured, "that I needed to learn how to let go." I stepped back, letting my gaze drift over his pathetic figure one final time. "Well, Ryan," I said with a small, satisfied smile, "consider this me letting go." I turned and walked away. I didn't look back. As I stepped outside into the cold night air, I inhaled deeply, filling my lungs with the crisp, clean air of freedom. Ryan was gone from my life forever. And for the first time in a long time, I felt light. Unburdened.
Free.
I had spent so many years building my career, working endlessly for success. I had spent even longer trapped in a toxic marriage, tied to a man who had never truly valued me.
But now
my life belonged to me again. I went back to my office, the office that I had built from the ground up. The firm dedicated to helping women like me, women who had been betrayed, women who had been told they weren't strong enough to fight back. Every case I took, every woman I helped, felt like another victory. I was no longer the woman who had once given everything to a man who had never deserved her. I was Elena Carter, and I had won. On our 10th anniversary, my husband poisoned my drink, watching me collapse while he laughed with his girlfriend. They thought I was dead. They stole my $250 million business and disappeared without a trace. But I survived. And after months of planning in the shadows, I returned. Not for mercy, but for revenge they never expected. I've spent 15 years building something I was proud of, my fashion empire. It wasn't just a business to me. It was my blood, sweat, and tears. I started small, with nothing more than a dream and a small loan from my grandmother. But over the years, I turned it into a luxury fashion brand worth $250 million. I had it all: the success, the admiration, the respect, and the perfect life. Or so I thought. I had a beautiful home, a loyal husband, and a best friend who was my business partner. Daniel, my husband, was everything I had ever wanted: charming, successful, supportive. We'd been married for 10 years. And then there was Sophia, my childhood friend, who I trusted like a sister. She was my business partner from the very beginning, and we had built the company together. She was always there, helping me navigate the business world, making decisions that would lead us to greater heights. I thought she was the one person I could always rely on. Our company was flourishing, and everything seemed perfect. We were celebrating our 10th wedding anniversary, and Daniel had planned a special dinner. I had no idea that this night, the one I thought would be about love and celebration, would be the beginning of my downfall. It started like any other evening. We were at an exclusive restaurant, the finest wine being poured into our glasses, a lavish feast in front of us. Daniel raised his glass and toasted to the success we'd built, to our marriage, to our future. I smiled, feeling on top of the world. But then, something changed. As I took a sip of my wine, I felt a strange sensation. It wasn't like the usual warmth of alcohol. This was sharp, intense, like something was coursing through my veins. My vision blurred, and a searing pain shot through my body. The room spun around me, and I struggled to breathe. I looked over at Daniel and Sophia, thinking they would help, but what I saw in their eyes made my heart stop. They weren't worried. They weren't concerned at all. They were smirking. The last thing I remember before everything went black was the two of them smiling at me: Sophia, my best friend, and Daniel, my husband, the man I had given everything for. It didn't make sense. How could they do this? How could they betray me like this? I woke up what felt like days later, but everything was different. I wasn't in the luxurious penthouse we'd once shared. Instead, I was in a filthy motel room, barely alive. My body was weak, and I could barely sit up. My head throbbed, and I felt disoriented, like I had just woken up from a nightmare I couldn't escape. A local doctor had found me and patched me up, but there was no mistaking it. I had been poisoned. The doctor was kind enough to tell me that I had been found in an alley, left for dead. The realization hit me hard. My husband, the man I trusted with everything, and Sophia, the one person I thought was loyal, had done this to me. They had tried to kill me. I tried to call my lawyer, but my phone had been wiped clean. I tried to reach my company, but I couldn't get through. Every number, every contact, every trace of my former life was gone. That's when I learned the full extent of their betrayal. Daniel and Sophia had stolen everything: my business, my bank accounts, my properties. They didn't just want me dead. They wanted to erase me completely. And they had succeeded. My company, the empire I had worked my whole life to build, was now theirs. They had taken it all, leaving me nothing. Worse still, they had framed me for financial fraud, making it impossible for me to ever return to my old life. I was now homeless, penniless, and alone. For days, I sank into a deep despair. How could this happen? How could I have been so blind? I had loved them both with all my heart, and they had destroyed me. But something changed within me. The despair turned to anger. No longer was I the victim. No longer would I lie down and let them get away with what they had done. If they thought they could destroy me, they were sorely mistaken. I wasn't going to be the woman they left for dead. I was going to become something else, something they never expected. I was going to make them pay. I spent months in hiding, creating a new identity for myself. I changed my appearance, moved to a new city, and erased any trace of my old life. But I wasn't hiding because I was afraid. I was hiding because I was preparing. I was preparing for the moment when I would strike back. I started from scratch, working with the underworld, the very people my old life had never even touched. I met Marco Vasquez, a black market broker, who taught me how to infiltrate networks, manipulate people, and dismantle empires from within. He was ruthless, but he saw something in me, a woman who had been wronged and was willing to do whatever it took to get her revenge. For 2 years, I worked in the shadows, building my power, gaining information, and biding my time. I knew that Daniel and Sophia had moved to Miami, living comfortably off the money they had stolen from me. But I also knew they would never see me coming. And when the time was right, I would strike. They thought they had won. They thought I was gone forever. But I was still here. And I was coming for them. For 2 years, I disappeared into the shadows, becoming someone they would never recognize. I had no money, no identity, no connections. Everything I had worked for 15 years of building an empire was now in the hands of my husband and best friend, the very people I had trusted most. But I wasn't the type to beg. I wasn't the type to run. I was the type to take back what was mine. I needed help. I needed power. And in the world I was stepping into, power was not given. It was taken. That's how I met Marco Vasquez. Marco was the kind of man my old self would have never associated with, a black market broker, a man who dealt in secrets and destruction. He had no loyalty, only business, and that's exactly what I needed. When I first approached him, he smirked, his cigar smoke curling through the air like a snake.
You, he scoffed.
The famous Elena Carter? The woman who used to strut around in designer heels and sip champagne at gala events? You wouldn't last a day in my world. I didn't flinch. I don't need to last a day, Marco. I just need to last long enough to destroy them. That got his attention. Still, he tested me. He pushed me into the darkest corners of the world I had never known. He made me prove that I was willing to do whatever it took. I learned fast. I learned how to disappear, how to manipulate, how to make people believe whatever I wanted them to. Most importantly, I learned how to take down an empire from the inside. Daniel and Sophia had moved to Miami, using my stolen fortune to expand their corrupt empire. They had taken my money, my company, and built something bigger, more powerful. They thought they were untouchable. I knew I couldn't take them down overnight. If I attacked them head-on, they'd crush me before I even had a chance to strike. I had to be patient. I had to be smart. So, I started small. First, I spread whispers. I had learned from Marco that power isn't just about money, it's about perception. People don't invest in weakness, they invest in confidence. So I started planting doubts in Daniel's investors. I used anonymous sources to leak information about fake financial instability, market risks, and fraudulent deals. Investors got nervous. They started pulling out. Stock values dropped. Daniel didn't notice at first. He was too busy living in the luxury that he had stolen. But Sophia, she was sharper. One night, I followed her to an exclusive rooftop party where she was trying to reassure investors. She stood there in her expensive gown, her champagne glass perfectly tilted in her hand, smiling and laughing. But I saw it in her eyes. She was worried. "This isn't normal," she said to Daniel when they stepped aside, just out of the crowd's earshot. "Things are falling apart too easily." Daniel, ever arrogant, just laughed. "Relax. We're untouchable." I smiled in the darkness. "No, Daniel, you're not." The next phase of my plan was more direct. I needed to hit them where it hurt. I infiltrated their inner circle using the skills Marco had taught me. Fake identities, false deals, secret recordings. I became a ghost in their world, a shadow slipping through their networks, unseen but deadly. I bribed their accountants to leak documents. I hacked into their encrypted transactions and funneled the information to federal investigators, just enough to make them suspicious, just enough to put them on a watch list. Then I planted a financial time bomb. Daniel and Sophia had a $50 million investment deal lined up with foreign investors. If the deal went through, they'd double their stolen wealth. But if anything went wrong, they'd collapse. So I made sure it went wrong. I used a fake identity to pose as a key investor, promising a huge influx of capital. At the last minute, I backed out, causing a chain reaction of losses. Investors panicked. The deal collapsed overnight. Daniel woke up to a $50 million disaster. And then, to make it worse, I leaked fraudulent transactions to the feds. They froze his accounts. His empire wasn't just bleeding, it was on the verge of death. The pressure was building. Daniel was panicking. He wasn't as smart as he thought he was. He relied on money, but he didn't know how to navigate a real crisis. Sophia, though, she wasn't stupid. She knew something was wrong. She just didn't know who was behind it. "We have an enemy," she told Daniel one night. I listened through a hacked microphone in their office. Daniel was pacing, drinking his usual expensive whiskey, furious. "We have plenty of enemies. Business is cutthroat." "No," Sophia snapped. "This feels personal." She was right.
It was.
But I wasn't done yet. I wanted them to feel what I had felt. The fear, the helplessness, the betrayal. And soon they would. Because I had one final trick left. A trick that would make sure they never walked away from this. They thought they had killed me. But I was alive. And I was just getting started. The cracks in their empire had started to show. I could see it in the way Daniel's confidence wavered, in the way Sophia's once flawless composure began to crack. They still had power, but now they were grasping at it with desperate hands. Their business was bleeding money, their investors were pulling back, and the whispers of fraud investigations were circling them like vultures. They didn't know who was behind it, but they could feel it. The pressure, the suffocation, the slow, inescapable downfall. But I wasn't done. Not yet. I wanted to take everything from them the way they had taken everything from me. I wanted them to feel the weight of betrayal, the agony of losing everything they had built. They had stolen my empire, my money, my dignity. But worst of all, they had stolen my trust. So I needed to take more than just their wealth. I needed to take their sense of security, their belief that they were in control. Sophia was the first to crack. She had always been the sharper one, the one who sensed things before Daniel did. She knew something was wrong, even if she didn't know exactly what. I watched her from the shadows, tracking her every move. She started taking secret meetings, trying to figure out who was sabotaging them. She hired private investigators, looking for a ghost that no longer existed. One night, she met with a broker in a secluded restaurant. I sat a few tables away, unnoticed. Her voice was tense, her fingers gripping the stem of her wine glass too tightly.
"There's someone after us," she said.
"Someone who knows too much." The broker shrugged. "Business enemies?" Sophia shook her head.
"No.
This isn't just business. It's personal." She was right. But it was already too late for her to do anything about it. The final piece of my plan was simple. I needed to make them turn on each other. I needed them to destroy themselves from within. And so I planted the seeds. I sent anonymous emails to Daniel, making it seem like Sophia had been embezzling from their accounts. I made sure the financial discrepancies looked real, forged the documents so perfectly that even an expert would believe them. Daniel, already paranoid from the financial collapse, took the bait. I could see it happening. Small, subtle shifts in the way they spoke to each other, the way they avoided each other's eyes. Daniel stopped trusting her. Sophia grew defensive. Their once unbreakable partnership was now cracking under the weight of suspicion. Then I sent Sophia something even more damning. Emails between Daniel and a mysterious offshore account. Fake, of course, but convincing enough to make her believe he was preparing to leave her behind, to throw her to the wolves while he made his escape. And it worked. The night it all fell apart, I was there, watching from the shadows. They were in their penthouse, their voices echoing through the halls. "You think I don't know what you've been doing?" Daniel shouted. Sophia scoffed, her arms crossed. "Oh, that's rich coming from you. How long have you been funneling money out of our accounts?" Daniel's face twisted with rage. "You're lying?" She threw the printed emails at him. "Am I?" He glanced down, saw the carefully constructed evidence I had fed her, and his face went pale. The doubt had taken root. He couldn't tell what was real anymore. And that was exactly what I wanted. The argument exploded into something worse: violence, rage, betrayal. I had done it. I had made them destroy each other. By the time I left that night, they were no longer partners, no longer allies. They were enemies. And they were both desperate, which meant they were exactly where I wanted them to be. The next day, I sent out the final invitations. An exclusive investors' dinner, an opportunity to rebuild after their financial turmoil, a chance to regain what they had lost. They didn't know it yet, but they were walking straight into their own downfall. And I would be there, watching it all unfold. The night of the dinner arrived, and I was ready. This was the moment I had been waiting for, the moment I had built toward for 2 years. Daniel and Sophia thought they were attending an exclusive investors' gathering, an opportunity to salvage what little they had left. They believed they would charm their way back into financial security, manipulate their way out of the crumbling mess they had created. But they were walking straight into my trap, and there was no way out. The venue was perfect, an extravagant penthouse overlooking the city, luxurious enough to make them believe it was real. I had arranged for every detail to be flawless, down to the smallest touch. The guest list was fabricated, the invitations sent to only a handful of people who were either working for me or there to witness their fall. The air was thick with anticipation, though neither of them had any idea what was coming. I had been careful to remain unseen until the perfect moment. Daniel arrived first, his usual arrogance slightly dimmed by stress, but still wearing the confident mask he had perfected over the years. He greeted the guests, shaking hands, playing the role of the untouchable businessman. Sophia arrived soon after, draped in an expensive gown, her expression carefully neutral, but I could see the tension in her eyes. They barely looked at each other. The divide between them had deepened, just as I had planned. The dinner began, and everything was in place. They thought they were here to impress potential investors, to regain their footing after their recent financial disasters. What they didn't know was that I had already ensured there was nothing left for them to save. Every deal they had been holding onto had crumbled in the last 24 hours. Their accounts had been frozen, their assets seized under fraud investigations, and within hours, everything they had built with my stolen money would be gone. When the main course was served, I stepped forward. The room quieted as I made my way to the center, my heels clicking against the marble floor. Daniel's glass paused midair, his face paling as he recognized me. Sophia's breath hitched, her fingers tightening around the silverware. Surprised? I said, my voice calm, steady. You shouldn't be. The silence was deafening. Elena, Daniel finally spoke, his voice unsure for the first time in his life. You look like you've seen a ghost, I said, tilting my head slightly. What's the matter? Didn't expect to see me alive? Sophia recovered faster. This is some kind of joke, she said, forcing a smirk, but I could see the fear creeping into her expression. You're nothing now, Elena. Whatever you think you're doing here, it won't work. I laughed softly. You're right about one thing, Sophia. I was nothing for a while. But that was before I realized what I had to become. I took a step closer, lowering my voice just enough for only them to hear. Before I learned how to destroy people the way you destroyed me. Daniel's hand clenched into a fist. If you think you can threaten us, you have no idea what you're dealing with. Oh, I do, I said, my smile widening. You see, Daniel, while you were busy enjoying my stolen fortune, I was busy making sure you wouldn't have it for long. Your investors?
Gone.
Your assets? Frozen. Your deals?
Collapsed.
And in about 5 minutes, you'll have an entirely new problem to worry about. Right on cue, the doors burst open, and the police stormed in. Daniel and Sophia barely had time to react before officers surrounded them, their confused investors stepping back in shock. Detective Olivia Barnes, the woman I had been working with for months, stepped forward, holding up a warrant. Daniel Carter, Sophia Reed, you are under arrest for fraud, money laundering, conspiracy, and attempted murder. Chaos erupted. Daniel lunged toward me, but the officers grabbed him before he could take a single step. You did this, he snarled, his eyes burning with rage. I tilted my head slightly. Of course I did. Sophia, always the survivor, tried to talk her way out of it. This is a mistake. We're being set up. She turned to the investors. You know us. We've been in business for years. This is some ridiculous scheme. One of the officers stepped forward, pulling out a file. We have more than enough evidence, Ms. Reed. Financial records, fraudulent transactions, wire fraud, tax evasion. Should I keep going? Sophia's face crumbled. I watched as they were handcuffed, as the people they once considered allies stepped away from them in disgust. There was no one left to save them, no escape. Daniel glared at me one last time. You think this makes you better than us? I stepped closer, meeting his gaze. No, I said softly. It just makes me the one who won. As they were dragged away, screaming, pleading, I felt nothing but satisfaction. For the first time in years, I was free. I turned to leave, walking past the shocked faces of their so-called friends and business partners. The city lights shone through the glass windows, reflecting back at me like a promise of something new, something better. Everything they took from me was gone. My company, my fortune, my old life, it had all burned to the ground. But that was fine, because I had rebuilt myself from the ashes. And this time, no one would ever take anything from me again. After 16 years of marriage, my selfish husband dumped me via email. I'm leaving you, old lady, for a 25-year-old. Moving to another state and draining your bank account. I laughed, replied good luck, and waited. Minutes later, his world started crumbling, and he never saw it coming. I never imagined that my life would take such a drastic turn on what seemed like an ordinary afternoon. I was at my bakery, Sweet Haven, in Seattle, carefully assembling an intricate 5-tier wedding cake for a client. The scent of freshly baked pastries filled the air, and the quiet hum of my employees moving in the background gave me a sense of accomplishment. This bakery was more than a business. It was my dream, one I had nurtured for years. Then my phone chimed. A new email notification from Daniel Reed, my husband of 16 years. I wiped my hands on my apron, expecting some routine message about the house or bills. But when I opened it, my heart didn't pound. My breath didn't hitch. I had been preparing for this moment. Samantha, I'm leaving you. Jade and I are moving to Los Angeles tomorrow. I've emptied our joint account, so don't bother trying anything stupid. This should be easy for you, considering how much you love that little bakery of yours. Good luck. There was no apology, no regret. Just cold detachment. I read it twice, then a third time. And instead of breaking down, as Daniel had likely imagined, I simply exhaled and set my phone down. It was done. For nearly a year, I had seen the warning signs. His late nights at the gym, his sudden obsession with self-improvement, and his secretive phone habits. I wasn't blind, just patient. For months ago, after finding a $500 charge for a luxury hotel, I knew I had all the proof I needed. He had claimed he was working late that night. Instead of confronting him, I did something better. I opened a separate bank account, one he didn't know about. I transferred every penny I had earned from my bakery and let the joint account appear normal, just enough to keep him from getting suspicious. I had also hired a private investigator. I didn't want just suspicions, I wanted evidence. And I got it. Photos, receipts, text logs, enough to tear down every single lie he had ever told me. And now here he was thinking he had won. As if his betrayal wasn't enough, a second email arrived minutes later. By the way, I'll be sending movers to pick up my things next week. I know you'll be heartbroken, but let's be mature about this. Jade and I deserve to be happy. I almost laughed. He thought I'd beg? I glanced at the clock. 4 p.m. I finished decorating the wedding cake, ensuring each delicate sugar flower was perfectly placed. When my client arrived at 5 p.m., I smiled warmly, chatted about their big day, and handed them a cake that would be remembered for years. Daniel thought he had broken me, but I was still standing. As soon as I locked up the bakery for the day, I pulled out my phone and dialed a number I had saved under Plan B. It's time, I said simply. My lawyer, Rachel, had been waiting for this call. I'll file everything first thing in the morning, she replied. You're going to love what we've prepared. Oh, I already did. Daniel thought he had taken everything from me, but he had no idea I had outmaneuvered him months ago. That night, I poured myself a glass of Cabernet Sauvignon, the expensive kind I had been saving for a special occasion. This counted. By the next morning, the chaos had begun. At exactly 7:30 a.m., my phone buzzed with one missed call after another. Daniel. Then another name popped up, his mother, Margaret Reed. I let the calls go unanswered and checked my emails instead. A flurry of furious messages from Daniel filled my inbox. What the hell did you do? The airline says our tickets were canceled. Jade and I can't check into the hotel. Our reservation disappeared. Call me.
Now.
I smirked. Oh, Daniel. You should have read the fine print. I had reported his fraudulent charges to the credit card company, who immediately canceled the bookings. No flight, no five-star hotel. By the time Daniel finally got through, his voice was shaking with rage. You vindictive little. What did you do to our money? I let the silence stretch before answering, my voice calm. What money, Daniel? There was a pause. Then his fury erupted. You stole from me. No, I corrected. I protected myself. You stole from us. His mother, Margaret, called moments later. This time, I answered. Samantha, Daniel told me everything, she began, her tone sharp. You're being unreasonable.
I didn't say anything.
I simply forwarded Daniel's email, the one where he had bragged about draining our shared account and leaving me. There was dead silence on the other end. Then Margaret muttered, I didn't know he actually admitted it. I think we're done here, Margaret, I said before hanging up. At 8 a.m., I received another call. Rachel, the emergency hearing is set for next Monday. We have more than enough evidence to freeze all shared assets. Perfect, I replied. Let's make sure he can't touch another cent. As I ended the call, I stepped out onto the sidewalk, the crisp morning air filling my lungs. Across the street, customers were already lining up outside my bakery. I smiled, unlocking the door. Daniel thought he had ended my story. He had only just given me a new beginning. The first real blow landed on Daniel just 24 hours after his grand exit. That morning, I was in the bakery kneading dough for a fresh batch of croissants when my phone vibrated on the counter. Another email from Daniel. This time, the tone was different. Samantha, stop playing games. You had no right to touch our finances. I'll take you to court if I have to. I don't want to get ugly, but you're forcing my hand. I smiled. He had no idea that I had already forced his hand. By the time he had typed out his threats, my lawyer had already frozen all shared assets under a legal injunction. Daniel couldn't withdraw a single dollar more. A few minutes later, another email arrived. This time, it wasn't from Daniel, it was from my private investigator. Confirmed, Daniel's credit cards have been maxed out for months. His bank account is nearly empty. He's made several failed attempts to apply for new credit. Also, Jade's social media posts indicate frustration. She expected a luxury lifestyle and is currently staying in a budget motel. More updates to come. I took a slow sip of my morning coffee. Daniel was officially drowning, and I was about to watch him sink. By Monday morning, I was sitting in court, wearing my best navy blue suit, ready to finalize Daniel's downfall. He arrived 15 minutes late, looking disheveled and exhausted. His expensive blazer was missing, replaced by an old jacket that didn't fit quite right. Jade was nowhere to be seen. I had a feeling she had already realized her mistake. His lawyer, a man who clearly hadn't had enough time to prepare, stood and tried to argue that Daniel had a right to half of my bakery. Your Honor, my client contributed to this business financially and emotionally. It was a shared marital asset. My lawyer, Rachel, didn't even blink. Your Honor, we have full documentation that the bakery was founded entirely by my client, without any investment from Mr. Reed. Furthermore, we have financial records showing that Mr. Reed referred to the bakery as a hobby and discouraged my client from expanding it. Rachel tapped a thick file of evidence. Receipts, tax filings, business contracts, all under my name alone. The judge turned to Daniel. Do you have any documented proof that you financially contributed to the bakery, Mr. Reed? Daniel shifted uncomfortably. I mean, I supported her. You know, emotionally. I was there. The judge raised an eyebrow. Emotional support is not financial contribution. Your claim is denied. And just like that, Daniel lost his last hope of taking anything from me. But the final humiliation was yet to come. Rachel stood again. Your Honor, my client has also provided evidence of Mr. Reed admitting, in writing, to draining their shared bank account, an action that constitutes financial misconduct under Washington state law. She handed over printouts of Daniel's emails, the ones where he had mocked me for emptying our account and bragged about moving to Los Angeles. The judge scanned the pages. "Mr. Reed, do you deny these statements?" Daniel's lawyer shifted nervously, but said nothing. The judge sighed. "Due to clear evidence of financial misconduct, all remaining shared assets will remain frozen. Additionally, Mr. Reed is ordered to return the withdrawn funds within 48 hours. Daniel shot up in his seat. "That money is gone. You can't just demand I magically replace it." The judge's face remained impassive. "Then I suggest you find a way, Mr. Reed." "That is not my concern." I glanced at Daniel just as realization dawned on his face.
He was broke.
His plan had failed. He had nothing. And I had won. By the time the hearing ended, Daniel had lost everything he had schemed for. His mother, Margaret, had been in the courtroom the entire time and had watched the entire disaster unfold. I expected another phone call from her, but none came. Maybe, just maybe, she was finally realizing what kind of son she had raised.
But Daniel?
He wasn't done. That evening, my phone buzzed with another email from him. "You think you're so smart? You won't get rid of me that easily. I have copies of all your bakery records. I can prove I was part of it. We're not done." I smirked and forwarded his email to Rachel. Her response came minutes later.
"Good.
More evidence of his desperation and false claims. He's making this too easy." Daniel had always underestimated me. He thought I was fragile, dependent on him. But now he was the one with nothing left. I didn't have to dig for information. Jade was making her complaints public. The once proud, flashy 22-year-old who had thought she was trading up for a glamorous life was now posting vague, bitter Instagram stories about betrayal and bad decisions. Be careful who you trust. Some people only pretend to be successful. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. She had made her choice. And now, like Daniel, she was living the consequences. Meanwhile, I had bigger things to focus on. The bakery was thriving. Customers had started showing up in larger numbers, many of them whispering about my legendary divorce. Some even bought extra pastries just to support me. My ex did something similar, a woman confided while paying for a dozen cupcakes. Thought he could leave and take everything. Men like that never expect us to be smarter than them. She winked before leaving. She was right. Daniel never saw me coming. And I was just getting started. Daniel's desperation only grew after the court ruling. He had lost access to my bakery. The money he had stolen was now a legal matter, and his grand escape to Los Angeles had turned into a complete disaster. I knew he wasn't the kind of man to admit defeat. He would try to twist the situation, rewrite history in a way that made him the victim. And that's exactly what he did. The first sign of his unraveling came in the form of a message from a mutual friend, Lisa. She owned a coffee shop a few blocks from my bakery and had always been friendly with both of us. She texted me late one evening. "You won't believe what Daniel is saying about you," she wrote. "He's telling people you tricked him, that you had this planned all along." I couldn't help but laugh. Of course, he was trying to make himself look like the poor, blindsided husband. He wasn't just a cheater and a thief. He was a liar who had never been able to accept responsibility for his own choices. Over the next few days, I heard similar stories from other acquaintances. Daniel had started reaching out to people, spinning a pathetic tale about how I had trapped him in a loveless marriage and then set him up to fail. He left out the part where he had been sneaking around with a 22-year-old and emptying our bank account. But the most pathetic part was how he still thought people would believe him. I didn't bother defending myself. The truth had already spoken for itself. The court had ruled in my favor. The evidence was undeniable. And, besides, I had more important things to focus on. The bakery was thriving. Business was better than ever, and whether people admitted it or not, they loved a story of resilience. Customers came in, not just for pastries and cakes, but to support me. Some were women who had been through similar betrayals. Others were just impressed that I had stood my ground and come out stronger. Every day, I saw new faces, people who wanted to shake my hand and tell me that I inspired them. It was strange at first, but eventually I embraced it. Meanwhile, Daniel's situation kept getting worse. The last time I had seen him in court, he still had that smug confidence, the kind that suggested he thought he could turn everything around. But now, reality had caught up with him. Jade had left him. That part didn't surprise me at all. One of Daniel's former co-workers, Brandon, stopped by the bakery one evening. He had always been polite to me in the past, but I never expected him to come in and give me updates about my ex-husband. "I just thought you should know," Brandon said as he sipped his coffee. "Jade dumped him. She kicked him out of her apartment a few weeks ago. Apparently, she finally realized he wasn't the rich, powerful guy he made himself out to be." I raised an eyebrow. "And how do you know this?" "She's been complaining about him to everyone," Brandon said with a smirk. "Said he was bitter, always blaming you for everything, and that he actually expected her to support him financially. She called him dead weight and said she made the biggest mistake of her life." I couldn't help but chuckle. Jade had thought she was getting some fantasy version of Daniel, a successful, exciting older man. But in reality, she had ended up with a broke, bitter mess who had lost everything in a failed scheme. I didn't feel sorry for her. She had helped destroy my marriage. She had made her choice. But at least she had learned her lesson quickly. Daniel, on the other hand, had learned nothing. His mother, Margaret, called me for the first time in months. I debated whether to answer, but curiosity got the best of me. "Samantha," she said, her voice softer than I remembered. "I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but I don't know what to do with him. He's still blaming you for everything.
He's angry all the time.
He won't accept that this is his fault." I didn't respond. What was there to say? "He's still living here," she continued, almost as if she was embarrassed. "He lost his job. The company found out about his relationship with Jade, and they let him go. It was a violation of company policy, apparently." That part surprised me. I hadn't expected him to lose his job entirely. I thought maybe he'd be demoted, maybe passed over for promotions, but fired? That was worse than I expected. "He's trying to fight it," Margaret said. "Says it was unfair. He even tried to claim age discrimination. But they're not budging." I sighed, shaking my head. "I don't know what you want me to say, Margaret." She hesitated. "I guess. I just wanted to say I'm sorry. I should have believed you from the beginning. It wasn't much, but it was something." After we hung up, I sat at my desk in the back of the bakery, staring at the framed screenshot I had kept. It was the last email Daniel had sent before I blocked him. "Enjoy your little bakery. At least it'll keep you busy in your old age." I had left it there as a reminder, but as I looked at it now, I realized something. I didn't need the reminder anymore. I had moved on. I had built something stronger, something permanent. Daniel had tried to reduce me to nothing, but in the end, he had only destroyed himself. The next morning, I removed the framed email from my wall and threw it in the trash. Years passed, and life kept moving forward. My bakery expanded to new locations, each one thriving more than the last. What started as a single shop had grown into something much bigger, a business that not only provided for me but also for the employees who had become like family. My story had been picked up by a few local business magazines, but not as the woman scorned by a cheating husband. No, I was recognized as a savvy entrepreneur, a smart businesswoman who had built something lasting despite life trying to knock me down. I had long since stopped thinking about Daniel, but every now and then, news of him found its way to me. Through mutual acquaintances, I learned that he had finally moved out of his mother's house, though not into anything impressive. He had rented a small apartment above a garage in a not-so-great part of town. His finances were still a mess. After losing his job, he had struggled to find stable work. His attempt to sue his former company for wrongful termination had failed spectacularly, leaving him with nothing but legal fees he couldn't afford to pay. He had also tried to revive his dating life, but that didn't go well either. Women his age weren't interested in a bitter, middle-aged man still talking about his glory days, and younger women weren't fooled by his outdated attempts at charm. Jade had apparently warned her friends about him, even sharing old messages where he had desperately tried to win her back after she left. I wasn't surprised. He had thrown everything away, and for what? A fantasy that didn't even last a year? He had underestimated me, convinced himself I would crumble without him. But the truth was, I had never needed him. One afternoon, as I was preparing for the grand opening of my 5th bakery, something unexpected happened. Jade walked in. I recognized her immediately, though she looked different, less confident, less sure of herself. There was no designer handbag on her arm this time, no flashy jewelry. She stood by the counter, hesitating for a moment before finally approaching me. "I owe you an apology," she said, her voice softer than I had ever heard it before. I didn't say anything, just waited. "I believed everything he told me," she continued. "He said you were controlling, that you didn't support him, that he felt trapped with you. But then he did the same thing to me. The lies, the manipulation, the excuses. And when things didn't go his way, he blamed everyone but himself." I nodded, as if I had heard this story before, because I had. "I thought he had big dreams," she admitted. "I thought I was part of something exciting. But he never actually wanted to build anything. He just wanted to run away from responsibility. That I understood more than anything." She sighed. "When you froze the accounts, he thought he could live off me, just for a little while, until he figured things out. But 2 weeks in, he was already complaining about my apartment, telling me I should take out a loan for a bigger place. That's when I realized he never had a plan. He just wanted someone else to carry him." I almost laughed at how predictable Daniel had been. "I guess I just wanted to say," Jade added, "you didn't deserve what he did to you." For the first time since she had walked in, I truly looked at her. She had been young, naive, blinded by the fantasy Daniel had sold her. And now, she had learned the same lesson I had, but in a much shorter time. He was always chasing an escape, I told her. I was too busy building a reality. She gave a sad smile, nodded, and left. That was the last time I ever saw her. By the time the bakery's grand opening arrived, I was no longer the woman Daniel had walked away from. I was standing in the middle of a thriving business, surrounded by employees and customers who believed in me. I had built this with my own 2 hands, with my intelligence, with my patience. This was mine. A few weeks later, I got one last update about Daniel, though it came in a way I never expected. Margaret showed up at one of my bakeries unannounced. She looked put together, dressed in one of the designer dresses she had bought from my store years ago. I hadn't spoken to her since the divorce. She ordered a coffee, sat down at a corner table, and after a few minutes, motioned for me to join her. "I saw Daniel the other day," she said, stirring her drink slowly. "He's still talking about his glory days, still telling people he was blindsided by the divorce. But he doesn't understand. He didn't lose everything in the divorce. He threw it away." I didn't respond. There was nothing to say. She took a deep breath, setting her spoon down. "I just wanted to tell you you were right. About everything. And I'm sorry I ever doubted you." I gave her a small nod, and that was it. I never heard about Daniel again. I never looked him up. Never wondered where he ended up. He was nothing more than a footnote in my story. And as I stood in my office that evening, looking at the framed quote hanging on my wall, the one that read, "Success is the best revenge," I knew, without a doubt, that I had won. Not by destroying him. Not by getting even. I won because I built something real. Because I never let him take away what mattered most. Because I had always been stronger than he ever realized. And that was all the closure I needed. When I was in labor, I stopped my husband from leaving for my sister-in-law's wedding. He slapped me hard, saying, "You're just pregnant, not dying." He drained my savings account and abandoned me. But upon his return a week later, a shocking surprise awaited him. One he never saw coming. My name is Emma, and this is the story of how I learned the hard way that love, loyalty, and family are not always what they seem. For years, I believed I had the perfect life. I was 30 years old, working as a marketing manager in Chicago, USA. I had a stable career, financial independence, and a future I thought was secure. I was married to Jason, a 35-year-old real estate agent, a man I once thought was my rock, my partner, my love. For the first few years of our marriage, things seemed normal, maybe even happy. Jason was charming and attentive, and I truly believed we were building a life together. But there was always one thing that I struggled with: his family. Jason was incredibly close to his mother, Margaret, and his younger sister, Olivia, who was 28 and worked as an event planner. At first, I admired their bond. They had been through a lot together after Jason's father passed away, and I respected that. But what I failed to see at the time was how much their influence controlled his every decision, and how little space they left for me in his life. At first, Margaret seemed warm and welcoming. She would invite me over for dinner, ask about my job, and make me feel like part of the family. Olivia, too, was polite if a little distant. I was relieved, thinking I had found a second family. But over time, the warmth faded, replaced by subtle jabs and manipulative games. Margaret constantly criticized me in disguised insults. "Oh, a marketing manager? That must be exhausting, pretending to be creative all day," she'd say with a smirk. Or, "You're always so busy with work. No wonder you don't have time to make Jason's favorite meals." I'd laugh it off, but deep down it stung. Olivia followed in her mother's footsteps, whispering behind my back, giving me disapproving looks. The two of them had a tight grip on Jason, and every time I tried to bring it up, he'd brush it off. "You're overreacting, Emma," he'd say. "They love you. You just need to relax."
So I tried.
I told myself I was just being sensitive. After all, no family is perfect, right? A couple of years into our marriage, I found out I was pregnant. I was overjoyed. I thought maybe this would be a fresh start for Jason and me, a reason for him to finally put our family first instead of his mother and sister. But I was wrong. Pregnancy was far from the magical experience I had imagined. From the beginning, I suffered from severe nausea, dizziness, and extreme fatigue. As the months went by, I developed a rare complication that began affecting my eyesight. I struggled to do basic tasks, and the emotional weight of it all was overwhelming. I needed support, but Jason was nowhere to be found. Instead of stepping up, he spent more and more time at Margaret's house. If I asked him to help with chores or run errands, he'd sigh in frustration and say, "Emma, I work all day. Can't you just rest?" It's not that hard, but it was hard. I felt alone, trapped in a marriage where my needs didn't matter. Even when I broke down crying, telling him how much I was struggling, he just rolled his eyes and walked away. One night, when I was 7 months pregnant, Jason came home later than usual, laughing on the phone with Olivia. When he finally got off the call, I asked where he had been. "Olivia's planning her wedding," he said casually, tossing his jacket onto the couch. "I was helping her with the guest list." I blinked, confused. "Her wedding?" "Yeah," he said, stretching. "She and her fiancé are getting married in New York in a few months. Big venue, fancy dinner, the whole thing. It's going to be amazing." I felt a sinking feeling in my stomach. "Jason, I'll be 8 months pregnant when they get married. I don't think I can travel." "You don't have to," he interrupted. "Mom and I will handle everything. Olivia wants a grand wedding, and we're going to make sure she gets it." His words hit me like a slap. I was his wife, carrying his child, and he was more invested in his sister's wedding than in the fact that I was barely able to get through the day. "But Jason," I tried again, my voice trembling, "I need you here." "I can barely." "You'll be fine, Emma," he snapped. "Stop making everything about you." That night, I lay awake in bed, feeling the baby kick inside me, tears running down my face. It was the first time I truly felt abandoned. As Olivia's wedding approached, Jason became completely consumed with the preparations. Every spare moment was spent at Margaret's house, and every dollar seemed to go toward funding Olivia's extravagant wedding. Then, the night before their flight to New York, I made a horrifying discovery. I logged into our joint bank account to pay some hospital bills, and my heart stopped. The balance was nearly empty. Panic surged through me. I checked the transaction history and saw the withdrawals, thousands of dollars gone. Money I had saved for the baby, the hospital bills, the future. Jason had drained it all. I turned to him, furious. "Jason, where is our money?" He didn't even look up from his phone. "I used it for Olivia's wedding." My hands shook with rage. "You spent our savings on your sister's wedding while I can barely afford my medical bills?" Jason finally looked at me, his expression cold and irritated. Emma, stop overreacting. Olivia's wedding is important. You'll figure it out. I felt like I couldn't breathe. Figure it out? I stepped closer, voice shaking. You're leaving me alone, 8 months pregnant, broke, and struggling. Then it happened. Jason raised his hand and slapped me. The force sent me stumbling back, my hand flying to my burning cheek. I gasped, eyes wide with shock. You always make everything about you, he snarled. This is your mess, Emma. You deal with it. We're getting late. Margaret and Olivia stood by the door, completely unbothered. Olivia smirked. Margaret simply sighed in irritation. Then, without another word, the three of them walked out of the house, left for the airport, and flew to New York to celebrate Olivia's wedding. And just like that, I was alone. I stood there for what felt like an eternity, my cheek burning from the slap, my heart hammering in my chest. The front door had slammed shut, and the house was eerily silent except for the hum of the refrigerator. My hands shook as I clutched my belly, feeling the tiny kicks of my unborn children. Yes, children. I hadn't told Jason yet. I was carrying twins. But what did it matter now? He had made it painfully clear that I was on my own. I stumbled to the couch, feeling lightheaded, my vision blurring. I had no money, no support, and I was heavily pregnant. My breathing became erratic, panic setting in. How had my life come to this? A few years ago, I was a confident woman with a promising career. Now, I was just a burden in my own marriage, discarded the moment I needed help the most. I tried calling Jason, not because I expected an apology, but because I was desperate. Straight to voicemail. I tried Margaret, no answer. Olivia? She blocked me. I let out a hollow laugh. They had cut me off completely. They had drained our savings, abandoned me, and were now in New York, celebrating Olivia's wedding with my money. I sat in silence, staring at the bank account balance, hoping it was a mistake. But it wasn't. Jason had withdrawn everything, leaving me with just a few dollars. My hospital bills were unpaid, my rent was due, and I still had to figure out how to survive the last month of my pregnancy alone. The stress must have been too much because suddenly a sharp pain tore through my stomach. I gasped, doubling over, gripping the couch as another wave of pain hit me.
No,
Not now. I tried to steady my breathing, convincing myself it was just stress cramps. But when I felt the warm trickle of fluid down my leg, I knew my water had broken. My mind screamed in panic. It was too early. The babies weren't due for another 5 weeks. I grabbed my phone and with shaking hands, dialed the only person who might help. Rachel. Emma? Her voice was groggy. I had woken her up. What's wrong? I could barely get the words out. I think I'm in labor. There was a brief silence, then a rustling sound as she jumped out of bed. I'm coming. Stay where you are. Breathe, Emma. Just breathe. By the time Rachel arrived, I was on the floor, clutching my stomach, crying in pain. She didn't waste a second, helping me to my feet and rushing me to the car. The drive to the hospital was a blur of pain, fear, and exhaustion. At the hospital, Dr. Bennett, a kind but firm obstetrician, took one look at me and knew there was no time to wait. We need to do an emergency C-section, he said. The babies are coming now. I nodded weakly, barely able to process his words. The last thing I remembered before passing out was Rachel holding my hand, whispering, "You're not alone, Emma. You're going to be okay." When I woke up hours later, the room was quiet except for the soft beeping of the monitors. My entire body felt heavy, but the pain was gone. I turned my head slowly, heart racing, searching for my babies. Then I saw them. 2 tiny bundles, wrapped in soft blankets, lying peacefully in the bassinets beside me. A boy and a girl. Tears blurred my vision as I reached out, my fingers trembling. "They're perfect," Rachel whispered from the chair beside me. Strong and healthy, a sob escaped my lips. I had done it. I had brought my babies into the world, even when everything was stacked against me. But as I looked at their tiny faces, reality hit me hard. I couldn't stay with Jason. He had left me to give birth alone. He had drained my money, humiliated me, and abandoned me when I needed him the most.
There was no coming back from this.
I wasn't just making decisions for myself anymore. I had 2 innocent lives depending on me now. Rachel seemed to read my thoughts. "You know what you need to do," she said softly.
I nodded, my jaw tightening.
"I'm leaving him." The moment I was discharged from the hospital, I filed for divorce. I didn't hesitate, didn't let the fear hold me back. I had nothing left to lose. When Jason finally returned from New York, he was met with divorce papers. He barely looked surprised. If anything, he scoffed. "You're being dramatic," he said, tossing the papers on the table. "Dramatic?" I repeated, my voice shaking with rage. "You left me alone. You drained our savings. I had to give birth without you." Jason rolled his eyes. "You handled it, didn't you?" I stared at him, disbelief washing over me. There was no remorse, no guilt. He truly did not care. That's when I knew I had made the right decision. As the divorce proceedings moved forward, I uncovered something that made my blood run cold. Jason hadn't just been neglecting me. He had been cheating on me. For months, he had been having an affair with Victoria, a wealthy businesswoman he had met at a real estate event. And the worst part? She had been funding his extravagant lifestyle. While I was struggling, he was out whining and dining another woman. But karma had a way of working faster than I ever could have imagined. Because just a few months later, Jason's world came crashing down. When I found out about Jason's affair with Victoria, I felt nothing. No anger, no sadness, just a cold, empty realization that I had wasted years of my life on a man who had never truly cared about me. By then, I was too exhausted to be heartbroken. The divorce was already in motion, and I was focused on one thing: building a future for my twins. Jason, on the other hand, acted like he was untouchable. He barely fought the divorce, dismissing it like it was an annoying task he had to deal with. He was so confident in his new relationship with Victoria that he didn't even seem to care that I was leaving. One day, during one of our last conversations, he smirked and said, "You're going to regret this, Emma. I'm about to be rich, and you'll still be struggling in that little dump of yours." I looked at him, truly looked at him, and saw a man who had built his entire identity on lies and illusions. I didn't respond. He wasn't worth my words anymore. After the divorce was finalized, I focused on surviving. It wasn't easy. Between work, childcare, and adjusting to life as a single mother, there were days when I felt like I was barely holding on. My eyesight was still weak from the pregnancy complications, but I managed. I refused to let Jason's betrayal break me. Meanwhile, Jason and Victoria were living the high life. Pictures of them at expensive restaurants, exotic vacations, and luxury parties filled my social media feed. Margaret and Olivia, once so proud and condescending, clung to Jason and his new wealthy mistress like desperate parasites. I ignored them, focusing on what mattered, my children. Then one day, I got a message from Rachel. "Emma, you're not going to believe this. Check the news." Confused, I opened my phone and searched for Victoria's name. And there it was, front page news. Victoria was a fraud. She had been running a massive financial scam, laundering money through fake investments and conning people out of millions. She had duped dozens of investors, including Jason. My breath caught in my throat as I read the details. She had disappeared overnight, draining Jason's accounts before vanishing without a trace. His house, his cars, all gone. The lavish lifestyle he had mocked me over had crumbled into nothing. Margaret lost her home. Olivia's marriage fell apart when her in-laws found out about the scandal. Jason was left with nothing but debt and humiliation. I sat there, staring at the article, feeling something I hadn't felt in a long time: satisfaction. This was karma. This was justice. Days later, my phone rang. I looked at the screen and saw Margaret's name. I let it ring, my pulse steady. When it rang again, I sighed and answered. "Emma," Margaret's voice was trembling. We need your help." I almost laughed. "Helps? Jason has nothing," she said quickly, her voice laced with desperation. "Victoria stole everything. He's lost his home. We have nowhere to go. I remained silent, letting her squirm. The children need their father, she continued. You can't just abandon us. We're family, Emma. I let out a slow breath, shaking my head. Family. The word felt foreign coming from her mouth. I thought of the night they abandoned me, the slap, the stolen money, the way they laughed and celebrated while I lay in a hospital bed, giving birth alone. I thought of how Jason mocked me, ignored me, discarded me like I was nothing. And now they were begging. I smiled to myself, a slow, deliberate smile. You weren't concerned about family when you left me pregnant and broke, I said calmly. You didn't care when Jason stole my savings. You didn't care when I had to give birth alone. Emma, please, Margaret whimpered. We made mistakes. You made your choices. I cut her off. Now live with them. And then I hung up. For the first time in years, I felt free. After I hung up on Margaret, I sat there for a long time, staring at my phone. It didn't ring again. No desperate messages, no follow-up calls. They knew. They finally knew that I wasn't their fool anymore. I wasn't the quiet, obedient wife they could push around, drain dry, and discard when it suited them. That Emma was gone. For the first time in years, I felt light. Like I had finally shed the weight of their cruelty, their selfishness, their endless manipulation. I looked around my small but peaceful home, where my twins slept soundly in their cribs, safe, loved, and untouched by the poison of their father's family. This was what mattered. Not Jason's downfall. Not Margaret's regret. Not Olivia's ruined life. And yet, I couldn't stop thinking about Jason. Not because I cared, but because the irony was too perfect. He had left me to struggle alone, convinced he had won, convinced his life with Victoria was an upgrade. And now? Now he had nothing. Rachel came over that night, bringing takeout and a bottle of wine. You're glowing, she teased as she set the food down. I laughed, shaking my head. I just feel lighter.
Free? She grinned.
So, are you even the least bit tempted to check up on them? You know, see how deep in the gutter Jason's fallen. I sighed, leaning back.
No.
I already know everything I need to know. He got exactly what he deserved. Rachel smirked, pulling out her phone. Well, in case you change your mind, you might want to see this. She slid the phone across the table, and curiosity got the better of me. I picked it up and saw a picture of Jason, unshaven, slumped on a park bench, looking utterly defeated. The headline above it made me snort. Yex real estate agent Jason Wright, once known for his elite clientele, now broke after falling for millionaire scammer. I skimmed the article. Jason had lost everything. His home had been repossessed, his car taken, and his accounts wiped clean. Margaret and Olivia were facing eviction, and Jason had been blacklisted from the real estate industry. Nobody wanted to work with a man who had been caught up in a scandal. He was a joke, a cautionary tale, a failure. I put the phone down, shaking my head. It's poetic, really? Rachel raised an eyebrow. How so? He left me because he thought he could do better, I said simply. Turns out, he was just a stepping stone for someone else's game. Just like he used me, Victoria used him. Rachel leaned forward, resting her chin on her hand. And if he came crawling back? If he begged you to take him back? I let out a slow laugh. Not in a million years. And just like that, I moved on. It wasn't easy. There were still nights when I lay awake, remembering how alone and afraid I had felt when I went into labor, how humiliated I had been when Jason walked out, how broken I had felt when I saw the empty bank account. But those memories didn't cripple me anymore. They were reminders of what I had survived, of what I would never allow to happen again. Life wasn't perfect, but it was mine. I rebuilt everything from scratch. I found a better job, moved to a more comfortable home, and made sure my kids would never grow up feeling unloved or unwanted. I was their protector, their mother, their everything.
And Jason?
Jason was just a name for my past. A warning. A lesson in betrayal, greed, and karma. The last time I ever heard from him was nearly a year after Margaret's desperate phone call. An unknown number popped up on my screen. For a moment, I debated ignoring it, but curiosity won. Hellos. There was silence. Then a familiar voice. Jason. But he didn't sound like the arrogant man I had once known. He sounded hollow. Emma, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I don't know where else to go. I have nothing. No home. No money. No family. I closed my eyes, taking in the weight of those words. He had lost everything. And yet, I felt nothing for him. No sympathy. No anger. No satisfaction. Just emptiness. I'm sorry, he murmured. For everything. I exhaled slowly, shaking my head. I don't think you even know what that means, Jason. A pause. Can we talk? Just for a minute. I smiled faintly, though he couldn't see it. Jason, you're a stranger to me now. I don't owe you anything. And with that, I hung up. No second chances. No mercy. Just peace. After my grandpa's funeral, my greedy parents and brother believed that the entire $90 million inheritance and business would be transferred to my brother. But when my grandma read the will, they were stunned. All the family business and inheritance were transferred to me, and they received nothing. Filled with anger, they threw chairs in frustration. Then suddenly my grandma took a bold step. What happened next was unbelievable. I never thought I'd come back home like this. Not with grief sitting so heavy on my chest, not with unanswered questions gnawing at my mind. But here I was, standing in front of my grandmother's house in New York, feeling like a stranger at the place that once felt like my only safe haven. I took a deep breath and knocked. The door swung open, and there she was, Margaret Carter, my grandmother. But something was different. The warmth that had always been in her eyes when she saw me was gone. Instead, she stared at me like I was a ghost, someone she had long buried. So, now you decide to show up? Her voice was cold. I flinched. Grandma, what's going on? My voice was unsteady, the weight of the moment crushing me. I came as soon as I heard about Grandpa. She let out a bitter laugh. As soon as you heard? You expect me to believe that? My heart pounded. What are you talking about? Her expression hardened. Your grandfather called you over and over, Emily. He was asking for you on his deathbed. He wanted to say goodbye to his little doctor, but you never answered. You never even bothered to visit. How could you be so cruel? The words hit me like a slap. No, that's not possible, I whispered, my hands shaking. I never got any calls. I would never ignore Grandpa. Margaret folded her arms, her sharp eyes narrowing. Then how do you explain this? She disappeared inside for a moment and returned with a small notepad. My hands trembled as I took it from her. The number scribbled in Grandpa's familiar handwriting wasn't mine. I stared at the unfamiliar digits, my stomach twisting. This isn't my number, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. I've had the same number since high school. Grandma, they gave him a fake number. Her eyes flickered with something, doubt, pain, maybe even realization. What do you mean? She asked, her voice softer now. I swallowed hard. I came home during my university break to see you and Grandpa. Nathan was here. He wouldn't let me in. He said no one was home. Then Mom and Dad told me you and Grandpa were in a nursing home. Margaret's face went pale. A nursing home? We never. Her voice cracked as she stopped herself. Her hands were shaking. I felt sick. Mom and Dad told me that you were both moved to a nursing home because Grandpa needed care. I kept asking where, but they always had an excuse. And then they told me about the funeral. Her lips parted in shock. They told us you didn't want to come. I clenched my fists. They told me the funeral was at 3 p.m. I showed up at the church at 2:30, but it was already over. When I asked them, they acted like I had mixed up the times. But I didn't. I wrote it down. I know what I heard. Margaret sank into the porch chair, her entire body trembling. The funeral was at 11 a.m., Emily. My knees buckled. I gripped the railing for support, my world tilting. They lied to both of us, I whispered. They made sure I missed Grandpa's last moments. They made sure I missed his funeral. Tears burned my eyes, but I refused to let them fall.
Not yet.
Margaret finally looked up at me, her eyes filled with sorrow and something else, regret. They stood in that church and told everyone you didn't care, she whispered. Your mother, your father, and Nathan. They told everyone you had abandoned your grandfather. Nathan even cried, saying he had tried so hard to reach you. I couldn't breathe. They made me believe it, Margaret continued, her voice breaking. I was angry. I thought my Emily, my granddaughter, had turned her back on us. But now, she let out a shaky breath. Now, I don't know what to think anymore. I dropped to my knees beside her chair. Grandma, I loved Grandpa. I still do. He was the only one who ever believed in me. He never made me feel like I wasn't good enough. Margaret reached out, her fingers brushing against my cheek, like she was trying to see if I was real. Then just like that, the dam broke. We collapsed into each other's arms, sobbing. All the pain, all the years of deception, all the grief poured out right there on that front porch. When we finally pulled away, Margaret wiped her tears with the sleeve of her sweater and squared her shoulders. Enough, she said, her voice steady now. We know the truth. That's what matters. But there's something else you need to know. I sniffled, my head still spinning. What is it? She stood up, her expression turning sharp again, not with anger at me, but with determination. We need to talk about your grandfather's will. I frowned. His will? She nodded, her jaw tight. I never read it before because I was too heartbroken. But now, I think it's time we see what James really wanted. A chill ran down my spine. Your parents and Nathan think they've won, she continued. They think they've erased you from our lives. But they're wrong. I wiped my eyes and sat up straighter. What are we going to do? Margaret grabbed the phone from the side table. Her fingers trembled slightly, but her voice was firm as she dialed. Mr. Harrison? Yes, it's me. We need to arrange a meeting. No, it can't wait. I watched as she set the phone down, her eyes blazing with the same fire I used to see in Grandpa's when he fought for what was right. They'll be here in an hour, she said. And the lawyer is coming too? A slow, cold realization settled over me. For the first time in my life, I wasn't just the forgotten daughter, the one who was cast aside. I was about to fight back. I sat in the living room, my hands clenched tightly together as I waited. The weight of everything that had just happened pressed down on my chest. The lies, the betrayal, the years of manipulation. Across from me, Margaret Carter, my grandmother, sat with a calmness that felt unnatural. But I knew better. This wasn't calm. This was the silence before storm. They think they can just rewrite the truth, she muttered, more to herself than to me. They think they can erase you, make you the villain. Well, not today. A sharp knock at the door made me sit up straight. They're here, Grandma said, her voice steely. She gave me a look. Stay here. I obeyed, staying in the kitchen just as she had asked. I could hear their voices immediately. Nathan, my mother Victoria, my father Jonathan. Their presence filled the house like an unwanted shadow. Mother, you could have called us earlier if you needed something. My mother's voice rang out, smooth as ever, but I could hear the impatience beneath it. We have been handling everything since Father's passing, Nathan added, his tone filled with exaggerated concern. We've made sure everything was taken care of, just as he would have wanted.
Lies.
All of it. Grandma didn't waste time.
Sit down.
Mr. Harrison will be here shortly. We need to discuss James' will. That seemed to catch them off guard. There was a brief silence before my father spoke. The will? Yes, Grandma said. I realized I never actually sat down to read it. I think it's time we go through it properly. My mother cleared her throat. There's no need for all that, Mother. We already told you. Nathan and I have taken care of everything. We honored Dad's wishes. Grandma let out a short laugh, but there was no humor in it. Oh, I'm sure you did. Another knock. The front door opened. Mr. Harrison, the family lawyer, stepped inside, carrying his briefcase. Good evening, everyone, he said, nodding politely. Then his eyes landed on Nathan, my mother, and my father. His expression hardened just slightly. Shall we begin? He said, pulling out a set of documents. I took a deep breath. This was it. Grandma's voice rang out firm and clear. Emily, come in. I stepped out of the kitchen and into the living room. Dead silence. Nathan's face froze mid-smirk, his expression turning to shock. My mother's polished demeanor cracked just a little, and my father, well, he didn't say anything, but I could see the tension in his posture. Emily Carter wasn't supposed to be here. Emily? My mother blinked, quickly recovering. I wasn't expecting you. I folded my arms. Clearly. Nathan let out a scoff. Well, this is awkward. He turned to Mr. Harrison. Can we just get on with it? The lawyer cleared his throat.
Certainly.
I have here the official last will and testament of Dr. James Carter. Silence settled in the room as he unfolded the papers. My heartbeat thundered in my ears. As per Dr. Carter's final wishes, Mr. Harrison began, all financial assets, properties, and business holdings, including the Carter Medical Clinic, are to be transferred to his granddaughter, Dr. Emily Carter. The air in the room shifted instantly. Nathan sat up so fast that his chair scraped against the floor. Excuse me? Mr. Harrison didn't even blink. I heard what you said. Nathan snarled, turning red. His eyes snapped to my grandmother. Mother, tell me this isn't real. Grandma didn't flinch. It's real. I watched as my mother's lips pressed into a thin line, her fingers tightening on the armrest. My father remained silent, his face blank. But that's impossible, Nathan sputtered.
What about me?
What did Dad leave me? Mr. Harrison flipped a page. Dr. James Carter left you nothing. The words cut through the room like a knife. Nothing. Nathan's jaw dropped. That's ridiculous. He turned to my parents, his voice rising. Mom? Dad? Say something. My mother finally spoke. Her voice was dangerously soft. This must be a mistake. It's not, Mr. Harrison said. Dr. Carter made it very clear. His granddaughter, Emily, worked hard, followed in his footsteps, and cared for people. Nathan, on the other hand, he glanced at my brother. Well, Dr. Carter saw, through certain behaviors. Nathan shot up from his chair, knocking it over. His face twisted in pure rage. This is unfair, he shouted. Dad always said I'd take over everything. He always told me I'd be the one to handle the family business. Grandma's voice cut through his tantrum like ice. Your father believed in earning, Nathan. You never worked a day in your life. Nathan's hands curled into fists. His face darkened with fury. This is your fault, isn't it? He turned his glare on me. You did this. I stayed calm. Grandpa made his own decisions. Like hell he did. Nathan spat. You were always the perfect one, the little doctor, the golden child. And what about me?
Huh.
Where was my chance? I stared him down. You had plenty of chances. You just wasted them. Nathan's eyes flickered with something, hatred, resentment, maybe even desperation. He turned back to Mr. Harrison. This isn't final. We can contest this. Mr. Harrison didn't even blink.
You can certainly try.
But Dr. Carter made sure his wishes were legally airtight. Nothing is going to change. Silence. Then, Nathan snapped. Before anyone could react, he grabbed a glass paperweight from the table and hurled it against the wall. It shattered on impact, shards flying everywhere. My mother gasped, standing up. Nathan, enough. But he wasn't done. He stormed toward me, his face contorted with rage. I stood my ground. Grandma's voice rang out, firm and unwavering. Nathan Carter, you need to leave.
Now?
Nathan froze. He looked at her, his own mother, and then at my father. But my father, for once in his life, didn't defend him. He just stared at the floor. Nathan let out a bitter laugh. Unbelievable. His gaze locked onto mine one last time. You'll regret this, he whispered. Then he turned and stormed toward the door, slamming it shut behind him. A heavy silence settled over the room. Mr. Harrison sighed. Well, that was dramatic. Grandma shook her head. That boy. She turned to my mother and father. You raised him like this. You let him believe he was entitled to everything. And now look at what you've created. My mother lifted her chin. We were just trying to do what was best for our son. You mean your favorite child? I said quietly. Neither of them answered. Mr. Harrison packed up his papers. If there's nothing else, I'll be taking my leave. He nodded at me. Congratulations, Dr. Carter. As he left, Grandma turned to me. Are you okay? She asked softly. I took a deep breath. I will be. But deep down, I knew this wasn't over. Nathan wasn't finished yet. The house was eerily silent after Nathan left. The tension still clung to the air like a thick fog, and I could feel the weight of everything pressing down on me. I had won, but it didn't feel like a victory, at least not yet. Grandma sat back in her chair, rubbing her temples. Well, she sighed, that went about as terribly as expected. I let out a shaky breath. He's not going to let this go. My mother, Victoria, who had remained silent since Nathan's outburst, finally spoke. You could have handled this better, Emily, she said, her voice sharp. I turned to her, anger simmering beneath my skin.
Me?
You're blaming me? Jonathan, my father, shifted uncomfortably in his chair, but as usual, he let my mother do all the talking. You knew how much this meant to Nathan, she continued, standing up and smoothing out her dress. Your grandfather should have split things equally. He should have considered Nathan's future too. I scoffed. He did consider Nathan's future. And he saw exactly what kind of person Nathan had become. That's why he left him nothing. Victoria's face hardened. You were always the selfish one. You never thought about how your success made Nathan feel. Something inside me snapped. Made him feel. My voice rose. Are you serious? I spent my entire childhood being pushed aside, ignored, treated like I was an afterthought while you and Dad poured everything into Nathan. And now you're blaming me because Grandpa saw through all of it. Jonathan sighed heavily, finally speaking. Look, Emily, your mother, and I just wanted what was best for both of you. I laughed bitterly. No, you wanted what was best for Nathan. I was never part of the equation, was I? Neither of them answered. Grandma finally stood up, looking at them both with cold disappointment. You raised a boy who believes the world owes him something. And now he's out there, furious and dangerous because, for the first time in his life, he didn't get what he wanted. That's on you. Victoria opened her mouth to argue, but Grandma raised a hand. Enough.
Get out.
My mother blinked. Excuse me? You heard me. Get out of my house, Grandma said, her voice calm but final. Your son just tried to attack Emily, and you're standing here justifying it. I don't want to see either of you again. Victoria's lips pressed into a thin line, her face turning red. You'll regret this, she said through clenched teeth. No, Grandma said. You will. Jonathan hesitated for a second, looking between us. I thought, just for a moment, that maybe, finally, he would say something, do something to acknowledge the years of neglect. But he didn't. He just sighed, took my mother's arm, and led her out. The door shut behind them, leaving only me and Grandma. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding.
Well, that was
necessary, Grandma finished. We sat in silence for a moment before she reached over and squeezed my hand. I'm proud of you, Emily. I swallowed the lump in my throat. Grandpa would have been proud, too. Her eyes softened. He was always proud of you. That night, I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Nathan's face, furious, unhinged. I knew him well enough to know this wasn't over. He was going to come back. And I needed to be ready. The next morning, I was at the clinic, trying to focus on work, when my phone rang. It was an unknown number, but I had a bad feeling before I even answered. Hello. Slow, familiar voice greeted me. Hello, little sister. My stomach turned to ice. Nathan, you think you've won, don't you? He said, his tone dripping with resentment. You think you can just take everything and walk away? I tightened my grip on the phone. I'm not taking anything. Grandpa left it to me, because he knew I would actually do something with it. Nathan let out a sharp laugh. Oh, I see. So now you're the noble one? The perfect little doctor, saving the world while your poor brother is left with nothing? You made your choices, Nathan. Grandpa saw through you. His voice dropped into something darker. Well, let's see if you're still feeling so high and mighty when I'm done. The line went dead. I sat there, gripping my phone, my heartbeat hammering in my chest. He wasn't finished, and I had no idea what he was planning next. I sat frozen for a moment, my phone still clutched in my hand. Nathan's voice echoed in my head. Let's see if you're still feeling so high and mighty when I'm done. I knew my brother. This wasn't an empty threat. He was desperate, furious, and most of all, he was dangerous. I immediately called Grandma. Nathan just called me, I said as soon as she answered. He's planning something. There was a pause. Then, her voice came firm and unwavering. Come home. Now. I didn't argue. Within 15 minutes, I was pulling into Grandma's driveway. As I got out, I scanned the street, expecting Nathan to be lurking somewhere, but there was no sign of him. Inside, Grandma was already making calls. I'm getting the security system updated.
I don't trust him, she said.
I nodded, my pulse still racing. I don't either. She hesitated. Do you think he would? I knew what she was asking. Would Nathan actually try to hurt me? A few days ago, I would have said no. But after seeing his face when he was disowned, after hearing his voice on the phone, I wasn't sure anymore. Before I could answer, the sound of shattering glass erupted from the back of the house. Grandma and I both froze. Then she whispered, "He's here." My heart pounded. I grabbed my phone, ready to call the police, but before I could dial, Nathan's voice rang out from the back hallway. Emily. Grandma and I slowly turned toward the sound. Nathan stood there, his face flushed, his eyes wild. He had broken in through the back window. Glass still clung to his clothes. He looked unhinged. "Give me my money," he seethed. My fingers hovered over my phone. "Get out, Nathan." He let out a sharp, bitter laugh. "No. You don't get to tell me what to do. You don't get to take everything from me." Grandma stood up, her voice steady despite the fear I knew she must have felt. "Your father left you nothing, Nathan. That was his decision." Nathan's hands clenched into fists. It should have been mine. It was supposed to be mine. His breathing was heavy, erratic. He took a step forward. "But you always took everything, didn't you?" His eyes locked on me. The attention, Grandpa's respect, my inheritance. I cut him off. "You never worked for any of it. Grandpa left it to me because I earned it." His face twisted with rage. "Earned? You think, because you went off to medical school, you're better than me?" He took another step forward. "You think because you play doctor, that means you deserve everything while I get nothing?" "Get out of this house," Grandma ordered, her voice shaking with anger. But Nathan wasn't listening. His hands were shaking. His whole body looked like it was vibrating with fury. He lunged. I barely had time to react. He grabbed my arm, his fingers digging into my skin. "Give it to me," he shouted. "Give me my share." I struggled, wrenching myself free. "Let go of me." "Nathan, stop." Grandma's voice rang out, but he wasn't stopping. His hands went for my purse, where my car keys, my phone, and my wallet were. He was trying to take something from me, anything. But I fought back. "Get out!" I screamed, shoving him back with all my strength. Nathan stumbled, but didn't fall. His eyes were blazing. And then, the siren sounded. He froze. I didn't even have to look. I knew Grandma had called the police. Nathan's face paled. His chest heaved as he looked between me and Grandma. Then, like the coward he was, he ran. The back door slammed. I ran to the window just in time to see him sprinting down the alleyway behind the house. But it was too late for him. The police were already pulling up, blocking off the street. They caught him within minutes. Nathan was arrested for breaking and entering, attempted assault, and property damage. My parents, who had spent years enabling him, didn't even show up at the station to bail him out. Grandma and I pressed charges. It was the final nail in the coffin. I knew that some part of me would always remember the brother I grew up with. But the man he had become, he was a stranger to me now. I didn't lose a brother that night. I lost him years ago. It's been 4 years since that night. Nathan was sentenced to 3 years in prison. When he got out, he tried contacting me, but I never responded. As for my parents, I haven't spoken to them since. They made their choice a long time ago. Grandma and I still live in the house. I run the Carter Medical Clinic just as Grandpa always wanted. His legacy is alive in every patient I help, in every life I save. One day, while going through Grandpa's old things, I found a photo of us. I was just a kid in the picture, sitting on his lap as he showed me a medical journal. On the back, in his handwriting, were just 7 words. My little doctor will heal the world someday. I smiled, holding the photo close, because I finally knew the truth. Family isn't about blood. Family is about who stands beside you when the rest of the world turns its back. And I had everything I needed. The end. During a family trip to the lake, we were boating when suddenly my cruel husband stopped the boat. My ruthless husband and mother-in-law forcibly removed my life jacket and said, "Finally, your chapter is over. We'll never see you again." They both pushed me into the lake and left me to die as they moved away. However, I survived bravely and saved my life. The very next day, I returned and gave them a shocking surprise when they woke up. My name is Sarah Miller, and for a while, I thought I was living a dream life. I married James, my college sweetheart, the man I thought I'd grow old with. I fell for him in my sophomore year. He was charming, thoughtful, and made me feel like the most important person in the world. After graduation, we decided to take the next step and got married. I couldn't have been happier. We settled in a cozy home near Lake Tahoe, California. It was beautiful, serene, and everything I imagined our life would be. James worked as a Navy officer, a job that gave him pride and purpose. I admired him for his dedication, and he made me feel so loved in return. His mother, Margaret, was initially very welcoming. Before the wedding, she treated me like a daughter. She would compliment me, share family recipes, and even give me advice about married life. I remember thinking how lucky I was to have such a supportive mother-in-law. But as I was about to learn, appearances can be deceiving. The first year of marriage was blissful. James would come home and talk to me about his day, and we'd plan little outings by the lake on weekends. We both loved boating, and those trips felt like an escape from the world. Margaret would visit occasionally, and she seemed genuinely happy for us. Life felt perfect. But things started to change in the second year of our marriage. It began with subtle comments from Margaret. "Sarah, when are you planning to make me a grandmother?" she'd ask, her tone light but insistent. At first, I laughed it off. "Whenever the time is right, Margaret. We're just enjoying our time together for now." But her remarks became more frequent, and James started echoing them. What was once a casual conversation became a pointed demand. They told me I needed to focus on starting a family, that it was my duty as a wife. I explained that these things couldn't be forced, but they wouldn't listen. "You've got 3 months, Sarah," Margaret finally said one evening, her voice cold. "If you're not pregnant by then, we'll have to reevaluate your place in this family." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. James sat silently, avoiding my eyes, as though he agreed with her. I felt like my entire world was shifting beneath me. I loved James deeply and wanted to have children with him someday, but this pressure, this ultimatum, it was suffocating. As I tried to process their growing hostility, I noticed other changes in James. He became distant. The man who once showered me with affection now seemed preoccupied, distracted. I chalked it up to stress from his job, but something in my gut told me it was more than that. Margaret, too, began acting colder toward me. She stopped visiting as often, and, when she did, her warmth was gone. She would criticize little things, how I kept the house, the meals I cooked, my appearance. It felt like I could do nothing right in her eyes. One night, I finally confronted James. "What's happening to us?" I asked, tears brimming in my eyes. "You've changed, James. You're not the man I married." He looked at me with a mix of guilt and frustration. "I'm just under a lot of pressure, Sarah. Margaret is worried about the family's future, and I don't know how to handle it." His words didn't comfort me. They only added to my unease. I started feeling like an outsider in my own marriage, and my once loving home began to feel like a prison. What I didn't know then was that James was hiding a secret, one that would shatter the life I thought we had built together. He was having an affair with Angela Harris, a wealthy businesswoman who had been financing his extravagant lifestyle behind my back. Margaret, ever the schemer, fully supported this relationship. To her, Angela was a better fit for James, richer, more influential. And together, they were plotting to remove me from the picture entirely. But I didn't suspect any of this at the time. I was still clinging to the hope that we could fix our marriage, that this was just a rough patch. Even when Margaret's demands became crueler and James's affection grew colder, I tried to convince myself that love could conquer all. Then came the day that changed everything. James came home unusually cheerful and suggested a trip to the lake. "You've been so stressed lately," he said, flashing me a smile I hadn't seen in months. "Let's go boating this weekend." Just the three of us, you, me, and Mom. I was taken aback, but cautiously hopeful. Maybe he was trying to mend things between us. Maybe this was his way of saying he still cared. I agreed, despite the nagging feeling in my gut that something was off. When the day arrived, I felt a mix of excitement and unease. Margaret, too, was uncharacteristically pleasant, even offering to pack snacks for the trip. We drove to the lake together, and for the first time in months, they seemed almost happy. I wanted to believe it was genuine, but something about their smiles felt forced, calculated. Still, I pushed those thoughts aside. I loved boating, and the idea of being out on the water was enough to lift my spirits. We rented a small boat, and James handed each of us a life jacket. "Safety first," he said with a grin. I smiled back, trying to ignore the strange tension in the air. As the boat set off, I let myself relax, focusing on the gentle waves and the warm sun on my skin. For a brief moment, I felt at peace. But that peace was short-lived. As the boat drifted into deeper waters, James and Margaret's demeanor began to shift. Their cheerful facade cracked, replaced by something darker. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being led into a trap, but I couldn't imagine what was coming next. And then they stopped the boat. "Sarah," James said, his voice chillingly calm, "we need to talk." As the boat came to a stop in the middle of the lake, I felt an icy chill run through me. It wasn't from the water or the breeze. It was the look on James's face. His expression was eerily calm, almost too calm, and Margaret sat beside him, her arms crossed, a smirk playing on her lips. "Sarah," James began, looking at me like a stranger, not the man I had loved and married. "We need to talk about your future, or rather, your lack of one." I blinked, trying to process his words. "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice trembling. Margaret laughed, a cold, harsh sound that made my stomach twist. "Oh, don't act surprised, Sarah. You must have noticed by now that you're no longer welcome in this family." My heart pounded in my chest. "What are you talking about?" "I've done everything I can to make this marriage work." James shrugged, his calm demeanor unnerving. "It's not enough. Angela is willing to give me a life you never could. She's wealthy, supportive, and ready to start a family. You, on the other hand, are expendable."
Angela.
The name hit me like a punch to the gut. I'd heard James mention her in passing before, but I had no idea she was part of his life in this way. My mind raced, trying to understand how everything had unraveled so completely. Margaret leaned forward, her voice dripping with venom. "We've been patient, Sarah, but it's clear you're just wasting our time. It's better for everyone if you're out of the picture." Panic clawed at my chest. "Out of the picture?" I repeated, my voice shaking. "What does that mean?" James stood up, his expression darkening. "It means this is the end for you." Before I could react, he grabbed me by the shoulders, pulling me to my feet. I struggled against him, but Margaret joined in, her hands ripping at the straps of my life jacket. I screamed, begging them to stop, but they only laughed, cold, heartless laughter that made my blood run cold. "Goodbye, Sarah," Margaret sneered as she yanked the life jacket off me.
No.
"Please," I shouted, tears streaming down my face. "Don't do this. I'll leave, I'll disappear. You'll never see me again." But they didn't care. Together, they shoved me over the side of the boat. I hit the water with a splash, the cold instantly biting into my skin. I flailed, trying to keep my head above the surface as I watched the boat drift farther away. James and Margaret stood at the edge, their figures silhouetted against the sun. They were laughing. "She can't swim," Margaret said smugly. "It's over." My heart sank as I realized their plan. They thought I'd drown, that I'd never make it to shore. But they had underestimated me. What they didn't know was that I loved swimming. It was one of the reasons I had always loved boating. Despite the shock and fear coursing through me, I forced myself to focus. I took deep breaths, calming my racing heart. I knew panicking would only make things worse. I started swimming, keeping my strokes steady and strong, pushing through the water with every ounce of strength I had. The shore seemed impossibly far, but I refused to give up. As I swam, I heard the sound of another boat in the distance. I turned my head and saw two people, a man and a woman, staring in my direction. They were too far away to hear me, but they could see what had happened. One of them raised a phone, pointing it toward James's boat, which was now speeding away. I kept swimming, my arms and legs burning with the effort. I didn't know if I could make it to them, but I didn't have to. The other boat turned toward me, and within moments, I felt strong hands pulling me out of the water. "Are you okay?" the man asked, his voice filled with concern. I couldn't speak. I was gasping for air, shaking from the cold and the shock of what had just happened. The woman handed me a blanket, wrapping it around my shoulders as tears streamed down my face. "They tried to kill me." I finally managed to choke out. "My husband and his mother, they threw me into the lake. They thought I'd drown." The man's expression hardened.
"I saw everything," he said.
"We have it on video. Don't worry. We'll make sure they pay for this." His words gave me a glimmer of hope, a small light in the darkness. They told me their names: Andrew and Emily Carter. Andrew was a lawyer, and Emily was his sister. They had been out on the lake enjoying a quiet day when they witnessed the horrifying scene. "We're taking you to shore," Andrew said firmly. "You'll be safe. And I'll make sure those two never get away with this." As the boat sped toward land, I clutched the blanket tightly around me, my mind racing. My husband, the man I had trusted with my life, had just tried to take it away. Margaret, who I had once thought of as a second mother, had been complicit in it all. I felt a mix of anger, heartbreak, and determination. They had betrayed me in the cruelest way possible, but I was still here. And I wasn't going to let them win. When we reached the shore, Andrew and Emily helped me to their car and drove me to my parents' house. My parents were shocked when they saw me, soaking wet, shaking, and crying uncontrollably. I told them everything, from the betrayal to the attack on the boat. My father's face turned red with anger, while my mother hugged me tightly, sobbing into my shoulder. "We'll fight this," my father said, his voice firm. "They won't get away with what they've done." Andrew nodded. "With the video evidence we have, we can build a strong case. Justice will be served." That night, as I lay in bed, my mind kept replaying the events on the boat. The betrayal, the laughter, the coldness in their eyes. It was a nightmare I couldn't escape. But I also thought about Andrew and Emily, about the video evidence they had captured. For the first time in weeks, I felt a flicker of hope. James and Margaret had tried to destroy me, but they had failed. Now it was my turn to fight back. The morning after that horrifying night, I woke up at my parents' house, still shaken but determined. I couldn't stop thinking about the betrayal, the coldness in James's eyes, and Margaret's cruel laugh. The memories haunted me, but I wasn't going to let them win. They thought they had silenced me forever, but I was alive, and I would make sure they faced justice. Andrew Carter, the lawyer who had saved me, arrived that morning with his sister Emily. They had spent the night reviewing the video evidence and preparing a plan. Andrew's confidence gave me strength. "Sarah," he said, sitting across from me at the kitchen table, "the video we have is solid evidence. It clearly shows James and Margaret pushing you overboard, and their laughter afterward proves intent. This isn't just an accident, it's a premeditated crime." Hearing those words made my stomach turn, but I nodded. What do we do next? We filed charges immediately, Andrew said. We'll accuse them of attempted murder and conspiracy. This is a serious case, and with the evidence we have, the law is on your side. My parents supported me completely. My father, ever the protective parent, was furious. They deserve to rot in prison for what they've done, he said through gritted teeth. My mother, meanwhile, held my hand and kept repeating, "You're so strong, Sarah. We're here for you." We went to the police station later that day to file the charges. Andrew accompanied us, his briefcase full of documentation and the video on a USB drive. When we explained the situation to the officers, they were horrified. The detective assigned to the case, Detective Collins, took our statements and promised swift action. This video will make all the difference, he said. We'll start by bringing them in for questioning. For the first time since the attack, I felt a sense of power returning to me. James and Margaret had treated me like I was disposable, but they had underestimated me. I wasn't going to hide or let fear paralyze me. I would confront them head-on. The next few days were a whirlwind. The police arrested James and Margaret at their home. I wasn't there to see it, but Detective Collins told me that both of them looked stunned. They hadn't expected me to survive, let alone take legal action. I could only imagine the looks on their faces when they saw the evidence against them. The case moved quickly. Andrew worked tirelessly, preparing every detail. He explained the legal process to me step by step, making sure I felt informed and empowered. We were charging them with attempted murder, and Andrew was confident we had a strong case. When the court date arrived, I was nervous but determined. As I walked into the courtroom, I saw James and Margaret sitting at the defendant's table. Their expressions were a mix of shock and defiance. It was clear they hadn't expected to see me alive, much less ready to testify against them. Andrew started by presenting the video evidence. The room went silent as the footage played. The sound of their laughter as they threw me overboard sent chills through everyone in the courtroom. The prosecutor pointed out how their actions were premeditated, deliberate, and heartless. James's lawyer tried to argue that it was all a misunderstanding, that they had panicked and thought I was already dead when they left the scene. But the video and my testimony painted a very different picture. The jury could see through their lies. When it was my turn to testify, I took a deep breath and spoke from the heart. I described the years of emotional abuse, the ultimatum they gave me, and how I had trusted them right up until the moment they tried to kill me. James was the man I thought I'd spend my life with, I said, my voice trembling but steady. And Margaret, she was like a second mother to me. But they betrayed me in the worst way possible. They tried to end my life because I didn't fit into their plans anymore. But I'm still here, and I'm here to make sure they face the consequences of their actions. The courtroom was silent as I finished. I could see the jury members exchanging glances, their expressions grim. James and Margaret avoided looking at me, their once confident demeanor crumbling. Andrew's closing argument was powerful. He emphasized the cruelty and calculation behind their actions, and how they had underestimated me. He painted a clear picture of two people who thought they were untouchable, but who had been caught red-handed. As the trial progressed, it became clear that the evidence was overwhelmingly in my favor. The video, the witness testimony from Andrew and Emily, and my own account left no room for doubt. I could see James and Margaret growing more desperate with each passing day. Finally, the jury reached a verdict, guilty on all charges. The judge sentenced both of them to life imprisonment without parole for their premeditated attempt on my life. I felt a wave of relief wash over me. Justice had been served. James and Margaret had tried to destroy me, but they had failed. They would spend the rest of their lives paying for what they had done. As I left the courtroom that day, I felt a mix of emotions: anger, sadness, and triumph. They had taken so much from me, but they hadn't taken my will to fight. I was still standing, and I was ready to rebuild my life. When the trial ended and the verdict was announced, I felt an overwhelming sense of relief. For the first time in what felt like forever, I could breathe. James and Margaret had been found guilty, and their sentence, life imprisonment, was a testament to their cruelty and the justice they deserved. But even as the weight lifted off my shoulders, The scars they left behind were still there. Leaving the courtroom, I was greeted by my parents, Andrew and Emily. They embraced me tightly, their support a reminder that I wasn't alone in this battle. Andrew, who had been my pillar of strength throughout the trial, smiled and said, "You did it, Sarah. You stood up for yourself, and now they'll never hurt you again." I nodded, tears in my eyes. "I couldn't have done it without all of you. You saved my life, not just on that boat, but in every way after." The weeks that followed were a mix of healing and reflection. I stayed with my parents for a while, allowing myself the time to process everything. The betrayal I had experienced still stung, but I refused to let it define me. I began seeing a counselor to help me work through the trauma, and with each session, I felt a little stronger. Andrew and Emily remained close friends, checking in on me regularly. One day, Andrew visited with some news. "I thought you should know," he said. "James and Margaret tried to appeal the sentence, but the court denied it. They're going to serve their full time." I felt a surge of vindication. "Good," I said firmly. "They deserve to pay for what they did." As the months went by, I started to rebuild my life. I returned to my hobbies, especially boating. It was strange at first. I had to confront my fears and remind myself that the lake wasn't my enemy. It was a place I loved, a part of my life that James and Margaret couldn't take away from me. Slowly, I reclaimed it. I also began exploring new opportunities. I went back to school to study counseling, inspired by the help I had received during my recovery. I wanted to support others who had faced similar betrayals, to be a beacon of hope for those who felt lost. One evening, as I sat by the lake watching the sunset, Emily joined me. She handed me a small notebook. "What's this?" I asked, flipping it open. "A journal," she said with a smile. "You've been through so much, Sarah. Maybe writing it down will help you find closure." I took her advice and began writing my story. The love I thought I had, the betrayal, the survival, and the justice I fought for. Each page felt like a step toward healing, a way to make sense of everything I had endured. In time, I realized that while James and Margaret had taken so much from me, they hadn't taken everything. They hadn't taken my resilience, my determination, or my ability to start over. I was still standing, stronger than ever. Looking back now, I see my story not as one of betrayal, but of survival and triumph. I've learned that even in the darkest moments, there's always a path forward. I've found new purpose, surrounded by people who truly care for me. James and Margaret are where they belong, and I'm free, free to live, free to love, and free to be the person I was always meant to be. I bought my new luxury dream house, and before moving in, my husband announced that his parents would live with us. They treated me like a servant, took control of my house and personal belongings, and when I tried to stop them, my husband sided with them and warned me. One day, when they woke up, their world was turned upside down by the shocking plan I executed perfectly. My name is Hazel, and I never imagined that the life I worked so hard to build could fall apart so quickly. I'm 32, an interior designer, and I live in San Diego. Or at least I did. The house I lived in wasn't just any house. It was my sanctuary, a piece of my heart. My late Aunt Clara left it to me. She always said, "This house will be your safe space, Hazel. Cherish it." I did, and for a while it was exactly that, a place of love and warmth. Until everything changed. It started when Ryan, my husband, decided to bring his parents into our home without even asking me. Ryan and I had been married for 6 years, and while our relationship had its ups and downs, I never expected him to disregard me like this. Ryan was 35, a successful tech entrepreneur with big dreams, but his tendency to make decisions without consulting me was always a sore spot. One evening, as I was setting the table for dinner, Ryan casually dropped the news. "Honey," he said, barely looking up from his phone, "Mom and Dad are going to stay with us for a while. They'll be here tomorrow." I froze, the plates trembling in my hands. "What?" "Mom and Dad," he repeated, still scrolling on his phone. "They're moving in for a bit. It's no big deal. Just temporary." No big deal? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Margaret and Arthur, Ryan's parents, were difficult, to put it kindly. Margaret had a way of making herself at home in places that weren't hers, and Arthur always seemed to look right through me, as if I didn't exist. "Ryan," I said, my voice tight, "this is my house. My aunt's house. You can't just invite them to move in without asking me." He finally looked up, his expression dismissive. "Hazel, their family. What's the problem? You're overreacting." Overreacting. That word stabbed me like a knife. This wasn't about overreacting, it was about respect, about boundaries. The next day, they arrived. Margaret swept into the house like she owned it, her arms loaded with suitcases. She didn't even bother to greet me properly, just a perfunctory "Hazel" as she breezed past. Arthur followed, lugging a large bag, his usual stern expression in place. I tried to keep things civil for Sophie, my 3-year-old daughter. She was my light, my reason for everything. But even Sophie wasn't spared Margaret's interference. "Hazel, don't you think Sophie should be eating healthier snacks?" Margaret said one afternoon, eyeing the crackers I'd given my daughter. "She's fine, Margaret," I replied, trying to keep my tone even. "Well," Margaret continued, "in our house, we always made sure our children had proper nutrition." I bit my tongue, but my patience was wearing thin. This wasn't her house, and Sophie was my daughter. Things only got worse from there. Margaret began rearranging my office without asking, moving my carefully organized files and tools to better places. She criticized my parenting, made snide comments about my work, and acted like my opinions didn't matter. Arthur was no better. He rarely spoke to me, but when he did, it was to lecture me on how to support Ryan better. I tried talking to Ryan about it, but he brushed me off every time. "Hazel, they're just trying to help," he'd say, as if I didn't know better. "Can't you just give them a break?" It all came to a head one evening when I found Margaret in Sophie's room. She was going through her dresser, sorting Sophie's clothes into piles. "What are you doing?" I demanded, my voice trembling with anger. "Organizing," Margaret said, not even looking at me. "This room is a mess." "That's enough," I said firmly. "You have no right to go through my daughter's things." Margaret finally looked up, her expression a mixture of annoyance and condescension. "Hazel, don't be so sensitive. I'm just trying to help. This house could use some structure." I was livid. My house? My daughter? My life?
How dare she?
That night, I confronted Ryan. I told him I couldn't take it anymore. "Either they leave or Sophie and I will," I said, my voice shaking but firm. Ryan stared at me, caught off guard. "Hazel, you're being dramatic," he said, but there was uncertainty in his tone. "Am I?" I shot back. "Because this house doesn't feel like mine anymore. It feels like theirs." Ryan didn't have an answer, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of doubt in his eyes. I went to bed that night determined to stand my ground. But little did I know, the battle was just beginning. What I thought was the worst of it was only the tip of the iceberg. The real storm was yet to come, and it would shake my life to its very foundation. Looking back, that night felt like a tipping point. I thought setting boundaries with Ryan and his parents would be the hardest battle I'd face. But life had other plans. Things were about to get far worse in ways I couldn't have imagined. After my confrontation with Ryan, he reluctantly told Margaret and Arthur they couldn't stay permanently. It wasn't immediate, they dragged it out for a couple more weeks, acting like they were doing us some kind of favor by leaving. Margaret made her usual snide comments, things like, "And I guess Hazel doesn't appreciate help," or, "Some people just don't know how to manage a house." But I held my ground. Sophie deserved a home that felt peaceful, and I wasn't going to let anyone take that from her. Or me. When Margaret and Arthur finally packed up and left, the house felt lighter, quieter. I thought maybe things would go back to normal. For a while they did.
Or at least I told myself they did.
But Ryan, he became distant. He was always glued to his phone or a laptop, claiming it was for work. Late-night texts, hushed phone calls, and trips out of town became common. "Business meetings," he'd say. I wanted to believe him, but something about his tone, his body language, felt off. One night, Sophie was fast asleep, and I was cleaning up after dinner. Ryan had left for one of his business trips earlier that morning, and I was alone in the house. As I wiped down the counters, I noticed his tablet sitting on the kitchen table. Normally, I wouldn't have thought twice about it, but something about the way he'd been acting made me pause. I hesitated, staring at the screen. A part of me felt guilty, like I was about to invade his privacy. But another part of me, the part that had been ignored, dismissed, and belittled, told me I needed to know the truth. I picked up the tablet and tapped the screen. It was unlocked. My hands trembled as I opened his email. At first, it was just work-related messages, but then I saw a folder marked personal. Curiosity and dread twisted in my stomach as I opened it. What I found made my breath catch in my throat. Emails, dozens of them, between Ryan and a woman named Claire. The messages were intimate, flirtatious, and undeniable. It wasn't just casual. This had been going on for months. I scrolled through, my heart pounding. There were photos, too, selfies of her, some of them taken in hotel rooms. And then there were the messages from Ryan, talking about how much he missed her, how he couldn't wait for their next trip together. I felt like the floor had dropped out from under me. My chest tightened, and tears blurred my vision. How could he do this? To me, to Sophie? I spent the rest of that night sitting at the kitchen table, staring at the emails, trying to process what I'd just discovered. Anger, betrayal, heartbreak, they all came in waves, crashing over me. I thought about everything I'd put up with, his parents, his dismissiveness, his refusal to support me, and now this? When morning came, I knew I couldn't ignore what I'd found. But I also knew I needed a plan. Ryan wasn't just my husband. He was Sophie's father. I had to think about her future, about how to protect her from the fallout. The first person I called was my brother, Luke. He'd always been my rock, the one person I could count on when everything else fell apart. Luke, I said when he picked up, my voice shaking. I need to talk to you. It's about Ryan. He came over that afternoon, and as soon as I showed him the emails, he was furious. Hazel, you can't let him get away with this, he said, pacing the living room. You need to get out of this marriage. I know, I replied, my voice barely above a whisper. But I need to do it right. I need to make sure Sophie and I are taken care of. Luke nodded, his expression softening. You're right. You need a plan. And you don't have to do this alone. I'm here for you. Over the next few days, I reached out to a lawyer. I explained everything, the house, the emails, the emotional toll. She was kind but direct. Hazel, you're in a strong position. The house is in your name, and we can document his affair. But this isn't just about the legal side. You need to prepare yourself emotionally, too. I spent the following weeks gathering evidence, documenting everything. I also started making quiet preparations to sell the house. As much as I loved it, I couldn't stay there anymore. It was tainted by too many bad memories. I wanted a fresh start for Sophie and me, somewhere far from Ryan's lies and manipulation. Every time I looked at Sophie, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. She was my reason for everything, my motivation to keep going. I wasn't going to let Ryan's betrayal destroy her happiness, or mine. But confronting Ryan wasn't going to be easy. I rehearsed what I would say, imagining every possible reaction he might have. Anger, denial, excuses. I was ready for all of it. At least I thought I was. The day of reckoning was approaching, and I could feel the tension building. Ryan had no idea what was coming, but I did. This time, I wasn't going to be ignored. The storm wasn't over yet. In fact, it was just beginning. The day finally came when I knew I had to confront Ryan. The house felt too quiet without Sophie's laughter. She was spending the afternoon with Luke, who insisted I take the time to handle things without worrying about her. My hands trembled as I rehearsed the words I'd been preparing for weeks, but I reminded myself why I was doing this. For Sophie. For me. Ryan arrived home that evening, tired from his supposed business trip. He set his bag down by the door and glanced at me. Hey, Hazel, he said casually, as though nothing had happened. I didn't respond right away. My voice felt trapped in my throat, but I forced myself to stay calm. Ryan, I said evenly, we need to talk. He looked up, his expression cautious. What's going on? I gestured toward the living room.
Sit down.
This isn't going to be a quick conversation. He hesitated but eventually sat on the couch, his posture tense. I stood across from him, clutching the tablet I'd discovered the emails on. "I know about Claire," I said, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside me. For a moment, he looked confused, but then his face paled. "What are you talking about?" he said, his tone defensive. "Don't lie to me, Ryan. I saw the emails. I saw everything, the messages, the photos, the trips you took with her while I was here, holding everything together." Ryan's jaw tightened. "Hazel, it's not what you think." "Don't," I interrupted, my voice sharp. "Don't insult me by pretending there's some explanation that makes this okay. You betrayed me, Ryan. You betrayed our family." He stood up, running a hand through his hair. "Look, I made a mistake, okay? But it doesn't have to mean anything. We can work through this." I shook my head, my anger bubbling to the surface. "A mistake? Ryan, this wasn't a one-time thing. This was months of lying, of sneaking around. Do you have any idea how humiliating this is? How much this hurts?" "I didn't mean to hurt you," he said, his voice softening, as if that would fix anything. "But you did," I shot back. "And the worst part? You didn't care. You let me handle everything. Your parents, this house, Sophie. While you were out playing the devoted husband to someone else." Ryan tried to argue, to plead, but I held up my hand to stop him. "Enough, Ryan. I'm done. I've already spoken to a lawyer. I've already started the process of selling the house. Sophie and I are leaving, and there's nothing you can say to change my mind." His eyes widened. "You're selling the house? Hazel, you can't do that. This is our home." "No, Ryan," I said firmly. "This is my home. It was my aunt's, and she left it to me. You lost the right to call it ours the moment you chose to betray me." He stared at me, stunned into silence. For the first time, I saw fear in his eyes. "Hazel, please," he said, his voice almost desperate. "We can fix this. Don't do this to Sophie. Don't break up our family. Don't you dare try to make this about Sophie," I said, my voice rising. "You're the one who broke up this family. You're the one who made these choices. Now you have to live with the consequences." Ryan sat back down, his head in his hands. I stood there, watching him, feeling a strange mix of sadness and liberation. This wasn't the man I thought I'd married. The man I'd loved and built a life with was gone, replaced by someone selfish and unrecognizable. "I'll send you the divorce papers," I said finally, my voice calmer now. "And I'll make sure Sophie is protected. That's all that matters to me." Ryan didn't respond. He just sat there, his shoulders slumped, as I walked out of the room. I didn't feel triumphant or victorious, just drained. But I also felt a sense of clarity, a determination I hadn't felt in years. That night, I called Luke. "It's done," I told him, my voice barely above a whisper.
"I'm proud of you," he said.
"I know how hard that must have been." "It was," I admitted. "But it's not over yet. There's still so much to do." Luke reassured me that I wasn't alone, and for the first time in a long time, I believed him. I had a long road ahead, but I wasn't afraid. I was ready to fight for the life Sophie and I deserved. The confrontation was only the beginning. The real battle was just getting started. The days following my confrontation with Ryan were a blur of emotions and decisions. I filed for divorce, officially putting an end to the life we had built together. It wasn't easy. There were moments when I doubted myself, when I wondered if I was doing the right thing for Sophie. But every time I looked at her innocent face, I reminded myself that staying in a broken, toxic marriage would hurt her more than anything else. Ryan tried to fight the divorce at first. He begged, he pleaded, and he even tried to guilt me into reconciling. "Hazel, we have a family," he'd say. "Don't throw it all away." But it was already gone. He had thrown it away long before I ever discovered his betrayal. No matter what he said, I couldn't unsee the emails, the photos, the lies. The divorce proceedings were draining. Ryan's lawyer tried to argue for a larger share of the house, but my lawyer was brilliant. She reminded the court that the house was in my name and that Ryan had no claim to it. In the end, I kept the house, but I didn't keep it for long. Selling the house wasn't just a practical decision. It was symbolic. That house had been my sanctuary, but it had also become a prison. Every room was filled with memories I wanted to leave behind. I listed it quietly, and within weeks, I had an offer. As I packed up my belongings, I felt a strange sense of peace. This was the end of one chapter, and the beginning of another. Ryan's life, on the other hand, began to crumble. Word of his affair spread through his social and professional circles. He lost the respect of colleagues, and his business took a hit. Margaret and Arthur, once so overbearing and confident, found themselves shunned by their friends. I wasn't proud of their downfall, but I couldn't deny that it felt like justice. One evening, just as I was starting to settle into our new home, Ryan showed up unannounced. I opened the door to find him standing there, looking disheveled and desperate. "Hazel, please," he said, his voice shaking. "I've lost everything. The company, the house, my reputation. I need your help." I stared at him, the man I had once loved, now reduced to this. For a brief moment, I felt pity. But then I remembered the nights I cried myself to sleep, the way he had dismissed me, the betrayal I had endured. "Ryan," I said, my voice steady, "you made your choices. And now you're living with the consequences. I can't help you. I won't." "Hazel, please," he tried again, but I shook my head. "Sophie and I have moved on," I said firmly. "You need to figure out your own path." He left that night, and I didn't look back. Our new home was small but perfect. It was in a quiet neighborhood, with a little garden in the back where Sophie loved to play. I started my own freelance interior design business, pouring my energy into creating beautiful spaces for others while rebuilding my own life. The work was fulfilling, and for the first time in years, I felt like I was in control. Sophie thrived in our new life. Her laughter filled the house, and her curiosity reminded me of everything good in the world. She was my light, my motivation, my reason to keep going. I also reconnected with my family, especially Luke. He was my rock through it all, always reminding me of my strength when I felt weak. "Hazel, you're incredible," he said one evening as we sat on the porch, watching Sophie chase fireflies in the yard. "I hope you know that." I smiled, feeling a warmth I hadn't felt in years.
"I'm getting there," I said.
Ryan's presence faded from our lives. He tried to stay involved in Sophie's life, but his visits were infrequent and strained. I made it clear that I wouldn't tolerate any more manipulation or lies. My priority was Sophie's happiness, and I wasn't going to let anyone jeopardize that. The final step in my journey was letting go of the anger and pain. It wasn't easy, but I realized that holding on to it would only hurt me. Instead, I focused on gratitude for the lessons I had learned, for the strength I had found, and for the future I was building. One evening, as I was tucking Sophie into bed, she looked up at me and said, "Mommy, I love our new house." I kissed her forehead and whispered, "I do too, sweetheart." As I stood in the doorway, watching her drift off to sleep, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't known in years. This was our life now, a life of love, resilience, and hope. The journey had been painful, but it had also been worth it. I had found myself again, and I was ready to face whatever the future held. For Sophie and me, this was only the beginning. My husband humiliated me at the polo ground, introducing his girlfriend as his future wife. When I confronted him, his rage turned violent. He tied me behind a horse, leaving me injured and helpless. A stranger saved me just in time. But the very next day, I returned, not as a victim, but with a revenge so terrifying he never saw it coming. My name is Sophia, and if someone had told me that my life would take such a dramatic turn, I might have laughed. I used to believe I had it all, my passion for polo, a supportive community, and a husband who seemed to understand me. At least, that's what I thought. Growing up in a suburban area known for its vibrant polo grounds, I fell in love with the sport at a young age. Polo wasn't just a game to me, it was my sanctuary, my passion, and the place where I truly felt alive. By my late 20s, I was recognized as one of the most skilled players in our community. It wasn't easy juggling a competitive sport in a small town, but the joy I felt on the field made every challenge worthwhile. When I met Ethan, I thought I'd found someone who admired my strength and independence. Ethan was older than me, in his mid-30s, and his confidence had a way of making you believe in him. He said all the right things, praising my talent and encouraging my dreams, or so it seemed at first. Ethan was charming, and I was smitten. He made me feel like I could trust him, like he'd be my partner in all things. Little did I know that trust would be shattered. Even after our marriage, I continued to pursue my passion for polo. I remember how he'd occasionally show up at matches, watching me play with a detached sort of interest. Sometimes, I'd catch a glimpse of pride in his eyes, but more often than not, it felt like he was just waiting. For what I didn't know, at home, Ethan's charm began to wear thin. He'd criticize my focus on the sport, telling me I was wasting my time chasing a childish hobby. I brushed it off at first, convincing myself that he didn't mean it, that maybe he was just having a bad day. But the comments became sharper and more frequent. "Sophia, don't you think it's time to grow up?" he'd say, his tone dripping with disdain. "You're not some teenager chasing dreams." I didn't understand why he was so dismissive. He'd married a polo player. He knew who I was. But I stayed quiet, thinking I could balance both worlds, my love for the game and my marriage. It was a delicate line to walk, and I tried so hard not to falter. One bright afternoon, everything changed. I'd just finished a practice session at the polo grounds, feeling the usual rush of satisfaction after a good game. The sun was shining, the air was crisp, and I was chatting with a few teammates when Ethan arrived. He wasn't alone. Walking beside him was a young woman, elegant and composed, dressed in expensive clothes that screamed wealth and status. She was strikingly beautiful, the kind of beauty that turned heads wherever she went. Ethan didn't waste any time with pleasantries. Instead, he smiled, a smug, self-satisfied smile, and said, "Sophia, meet Olivia, my future wife." For a moment, I thought it was a cruel joke. My heart raced, and my mouth went dry as I stared at him, trying to process his words.
"What?"
I managed to whisper, my voice trembling. "You heard me," he said, his tone casual, as if he were discussing the weather. "Olivia and I are getting married. She's everything you're not, sophisticated, wealthy, and worth my time." I was frozen, too shocked to respond. The people around us had fallen silent, their eyes darting between us. Ethan's words hit me like a punch to the gut. "How dare you?" I finally said, my voice breaking. He didn't flinch. "Oh, spare me the drama, Sophia. You're just a cheap girl wasting your time with silly games. Olivia is the kind of woman who can actually make a difference in my life." His cruelty was like a dagger, cutting deep and leaving me gasping for air. I felt humiliated, betrayed, and utterly devastated. This was the man I had trusted, the man I had believed in. And here he was, parading his betrayal in front of everyone. I turned to Olivia, searching for some sign of guilt or remorse, but her expression was unreadable. She didn't say a word, just stood there, looking almost detached. I felt like my entire world was crumbling around me. "You're disgusting," I said to Ethan, my voice trembling with anger and pain. "You think you can treat people like this and get away with it?" His response was a cold laugh. "Oh, Sophia, grow up." I wanted to scream, to lash out, to make him feel even a fraction of the pain he'd caused me. But instead, I walked away, tears streaming down my face. In that moment, I felt utterly alone. Ethan had shattered my trust, my dignity, and everything I thought I knew about him. But as much as his betrayal hurt, something inside me refused to give up. I didn't know how yet, but I was determined to find a way to rise above the pain he had inflicted on me. Looking back, I realized the day was just the beginning. What followed would test me in ways I could never have imagined, pushing me to my limits and forcing me to uncover a strength I didn't know I had. The hours after that humiliating encounter with Ethan were a blur of disbelief and heartbreak. I felt like I was drowning in emotions I couldn't process: anger, sorrow, confusion, and most of all, a sense of betrayal so deep it left me breathless. I couldn't understand how someone I had loved, someone I thought loved me, could treat me with such cruelty. I spent the night replaying his words in my mind, each one cutting like a knife. The next morning, I decided to confront Ethan. I couldn't let this go unanswered. He owed me an explanation, if not for his sake, then for mine. I found him in the living room, casually scrolling through his phone as if nothing had happened. "We need to talk," I said firmly, though my voice wavered slightly. He didn't even look up. "About what?" he asked, his tone indifferent. "About what happened yesterday. About Olivia. About you introducing her as your future wife, while I'm still your wife. Do you have any idea how humiliating that was for me?" He finally put his phone down and looked at me, his expression cold. "Humiliating for you? Sophia, let's not make this about feelings. I'm being honest with you. Isn't that what you always wanted? Honesties? Honesties?" I repeated, my voice rising. "You call flaunting another woman in front of me honesty? You've been lying to me, Ethan, and now you want to act like you're doing me a favor?" He stood up, towering over me with an intimidating presence I hadn't noticed before. "You don't get it, do you? Olivia is my future. She comes from wealth, from power. She's someone who can actually elevate my life, not hold me back like you do." "Hold you back?" I said, incredulous. "I've supported you in every way I could, Ethan. I've worked hard to keep this marriage together despite your constant criticism and belittling of my passion. And now you're blaming me for holding you back." He rolled his eyes. "Spare me the speech, Sophia. You're nothing more than a cheap girl wasting her time on a silly game. You think polo is going to make you important? It's laughable." Those words broke something inside me. All the years of self-doubt he'd planted in me, all the times I had second-guessed myself because of his disdain, came rushing to the surface. "I don't care what you think about polo, Ethan," I said, my voice trembling with anger. "But you don't get to decide my worth. And you certainly don't get to treat me like I'm disposable." That's when his demeanor shifted. His indifference turned to rage, and before I knew it, he grabbed my arm and dragged me toward the door. "You want to see how disposable you are?" he hissed. "Let me show you." I struggled against his grip, but Ethan was strong, and his anger made him even more forceful. He dragged me outside, toward the polo ground where I had spent so many happy hours. It was empty now, eerily silent except for the sound of my protests and his heavy breathing. "Ethan, stop. What are you doing?" I pleaded, panic rising in my chest. He didn't answer. Instead, he grabbed a length of rope from the equipment shed and tied me to one of the practice poles. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might burst. "Ethan, this is insane. Let me go." But he wasn't listening. He mounted his horse, his eyes dark with fury. "You think you're so tough, Sophia? Let's see how tough you are when you're lying there helpless." And then he did something I'll never forget. He rode his horse dangerously close to me, circling around at a terrifying speed. Each pass was closer than the last, the horse's hooves kicking up dust and rocks that hit my face and arms. The fear was suffocating. I could barely breathe, my screams drowned out by the sound of the galloping horse. The physical pain was nothing compared to the emotional devastation. How could someone I had once loved turn into this monster? Every time I cried out, hoping he'd stop, he seemed to grow more exhilarated. It was like he fed off my fear. And then suddenly it stopped. I didn't know why at first. My vision was blurred with tears, and I was too terrified to make sense of what was happening. But when I opened my eyes, I saw Olivia standing a few feet away, her face pale and her eyes wide with shock. "What the hell is wrong with you, Ethan?" she shouted, her voice trembling. "Stay out of this, Olivia," Ethan barked. "This is between me and my wife." But Olivia didn't back down. She pulled out her phone and started recording. "You're insane," she said, her voice steadier now. "If you don't stop this right now, I'll make sure everyone knows what kind of man you are." Ethan hesitated, glaring at her. For a moment, I thought he might lash out at her too. But then, as if realizing he couldn't win this fight, he dismounted and stormed away, leaving me tied and sobbing on the ground. Olivia rushed to me, her hands shaking as she untied the ropes. "Are you okay?" she asked, her voice filled with genuine concern. I couldn't answer. I was too overwhelmed by everything that had just happened. But in that moment, I realized something. Olivia wasn't my enemy. She had seen the monster Ethan truly was, and for reasons I couldn't yet understand, she had chosen to help me. When Olivia untied me and helped me to my feet, I was too shaken to fully grasp the weight of what had just happened. My body ached from the bruises, but it was the betrayal that hurt the most. Ethan wasn't just cruel, he was dangerous. As I leaned against Olivia for support, I couldn't understand why she had stepped in. After all, wasn't she the woman Ethan had so brazenly declared his future wife? "Let's get you to the hospital," Olivia said softly, her tone kind but urgent. She wrapped her arm around me and led me toward her car, ignoring the cloud of dust that still lingered in the air. I wanted to resist. I wanted to tell her I didn't need her help, that I could handle this on my own. But the truth was I couldn't. I was too battered and broken, physically and emotionally, to push her away. So, I let her guide me, every step feeling heavier than the last. The drive to the hospital was quiet, except for Olivia occasionally asking if I was okay. I didn't know what to say. How could I be okay after what Ethan had done? After what he had revealed himself to be? My mind was a whirlwind of thoughts, questions I couldn't answer, and emotions I couldn't contain. But one question burned brighter than the rest. Why had Olivia stepped in? At the hospital, the staff immediately took me in, treating the cuts and bruises Ethan's cruelty had left behind. Olivia stayed with me the entire time, sitting quietly in the corner of the room as the nurses worked. She didn't look like the poised, confident woman Ethan had introduced at the polo ground. Instead, she looked shaken, as though the events of the day had unsettled her as much as they had broken me. When the nurse left us alone, Olivia finally spoke. "I'm so sorry, Sophia," she said, her voice trembling. "I had no idea Ethan was capable of something like that." I looked at her, unsure how to respond. Was this sympathy genuine, or was it just guilt? "You didn't know?" I asked, my voice hoarse from crying. "You're the one he's planning to marry. How could you not know who he really is?" Olivia sighed and looked down, twisting her hands in her lap. "I don't know what I was thinking. Ethan, he's charming, persuasive. He made me believe in this image of himself that isn't real. I thought I knew him, but after today," she paused, shaking her head. "I can't believe I ever trusted him." I wanted to tell her that she should have seen it sooner, that she should have known better. But the truth was, I had fallen for the same charm, the same lies. Ethan had fooled both of us. "What he did to you today," Olivia continued, her voice breaking, "was horrifying. I can't stand by and let him get away with it." Her words took me by surprise. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I want to help you," she said firmly. "Ethan needs to face the consequences of what he's done. To you, to me, to anyone who's been caught in his web." I stared at her, trying to gauge her sincerity. Was she serious? Could I trust her? But as I looked into her eyes, I saw something I hadn't expected. Guilt, remorse, and a determination that mirrored my own. "Why would you do that?" I asked cautiously. "After everything." "Because what he did was wrong," Olivia said, her voice unwavering now. "And because I can't marry someone like that. I won't. Today I saw who he really is, and I don't want any part of it." Her words hung in the air, and for the first time since Ethan's betrayal, I felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe I wasn't as alone as I thought. Maybe, just maybe, there was a way to fight back. Over the next few days, Olivia and I began working together. She showed me the video she had recorded of Ethan's violent outburst, a chilling reminder of his cruelty. "This is evidence," she said, her tone determined. "We can use this to bring him to justice." It wasn't easy. Every step of the process felt like reopening the wounds Ethan had left behind. But Olivia's support gave me strength. She wasn't just apologizing for her role in my pain. She was actively trying to make things right. We went to the authorities, presenting the video and recounting the events of that awful day. The officers were appalled, and their response was swift. A case was opened against Ethan, charging him with assault, abuse, and endangerment. As the legal wheels began to turn, I started to feel something I hadn't felt in weeks: empowerment. For so long, I had let Ethan's words and actions define me, but now, I was taking control. With Olivia by my side, I wasn't just surviving, I was fighting back. It was ironic, really. The woman Ethan had brought into my life to replace me was now the one helping me expose him. Olivia and I were an unlikely team, but together, we were stronger than I ever imagined. The path ahead was uncertain, and the battle was far from over. But for the first time, I felt like justice was within reach. And this time, I wasn't fighting alone. The days leading up to the trial were some of the most difficult of my life. Reliving the trauma of Ethan's betrayal and abuse was like ripping open a wound that had barely begun to heal. But I knew I couldn't give up. Ethan needed to face the consequences of what he had done, not just for me, but for every person he had hurt or manipulated. And with Olivia by my side, I felt stronger. Olivia surprised me in more ways than I can count. She didn't just stand by me, she fought alongside me. She was relentless in gathering evidence against Ethan, digging through old messages, emails, and anything that might prove his pattern of deceit and abuse. She even connected with others who had crossed paths with Ethan and had similar stories of his manipulation. It was as though once the veil of his charm had been lifted, the truth became glaringly obvious. When the trial began, I was terrified. Ethan was still the man I had once loved, and part of me dreaded seeing him again. But as I sat in that courtroom, surrounded by lawyers, reporters, and strangers, I reminded myself why I was there. This wasn't about the past anymore. It was about reclaiming my future. Ethan walked into the courtroom with the same smug confidence I had once found so captivating. He didn't even glance in my direction. His arrogance was infuriating, but it also strengthened my resolve. He truly believed he was untouchable. He thought he could continue to manipulate and abuse without facing any consequences. But not this time. The prosecution presented the video Olivia had recorded, a stark and undeniable piece of evidence. Watching it play out on the screen was harrowing. Seeing myself tied up, crying out for help as Ethan's horse circled dangerously close, was like reliving the nightmare all over again. The courtroom was silent except for the sound of my voice in the video, raw and filled with fear. I glanced at Ethan, hoping to see some sign of remorse, but there was none. He sat there, his face expressionless, as though the events in the video were happening to someone else. But the jury's reaction was clear. Their faces were a mix of shock and disgust, and for the first time, I felt like justice might actually be possible. When it was my turn to testify, my hands trembled as I took the stand. I spoke about the person Ethan had pretended to be, the man I thought I had married, and how that illusion had shattered over time. I described his growing disdain for me, his cruel words, and the terrifying day when he had taken his anger to a horrifying level. I also spoke about Olivia, how she had stepped in when no one else did, how she had risked her own safety to stop Ethan and bring him to justice. She could have walked away, I said, my voice steady despite the emotion welling inside me. But she chose to do the right thing. And, because of her, I'm standing here today. Olivia testified too. Her words were powerful, painting a picture of the man Ethan truly was, a manipulative, abusive individual who cared for no one but himself. She recounted how she had believed his lies, how she had fallen for his charm, and how her perception of him had shattered when she saw his true nature. I was horrified, she said, her voice breaking. But I knew I couldn't stay silent. What he did to Sophia was monstrous, and he needs to be held accountable. Ethan's defense tried to discredit us, painting me as a bitter wife clinging to her anger and Olivia as a jilted lover seeking revenge. But the evidence spoke louder than their words. The video, the testimonies, the corroborating accounts from others who had experienced Ethan's manipulations, it all painted a damning picture. When the verdict was finally read, my heart pounded so loudly I could barely hear the judge's words. But then I heard them clearly. Guilty. Ethan was sentenced to a lengthy prison term for assault, abuse, and endangerment. The relief that washed over me was overwhelming. For so long, I had felt powerless against him, but now, justice had been served. He couldn't hurt anyone else. Not anymore. After the trial, Olivia and I stood outside the courthouse, the weight of the ordeal finally lifting. "Thank you," I said to her, my voice filled with gratitude. "I don't know how I would have done this without you." She smiled, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "We did it together, Sophia. You're stronger than you think." Looking back, I realized she was right. The journey hadn't just been about holding Ethan accountable. It had been about rediscovering my own strength. I wasn't the same woman who had let Ethan's words and actions define her. I had fought back, found my voice, and reclaimed my life. The scars he left would always be a part of me, but they didn't define me. What defined me was the courage to stand up, the resilience to keep going, and the support of an unexpected ally who reminded me that justice is worth fighting for. As I walked away from the courthouse that day, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Ethan's chapter in my life was finally closed, and for the first time, I was ready to write my own story.